Hello, you are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby Podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
Two brothers looking at all things rugby from the point of view of Leinster and Ireland.
That is us.
This is number 84, episode 84. Jeez, they roll on very fast. And it's another nice long show because the international rugby does roll on and we're kind of contesting on two hemispheres as well, you know. So we're going to start in the southern hemisphere with Tri-Nations. We're going to look back on the 15-all draw between the Wallabies and the Pumas, which took place last weekend. We'll do a brief review of that before looking ahead then to the All Black Puma rematch this weekend, which is the penultimate round of the tournament and a very exciting fixture.
Certainly the game of this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And then from then we're going to pivot back on up to the northern hemisphere. We'll take a look at the Autumn Nations Cup. Preview all the games there. Starting off, we'll just go in chronological order there. We'll break down some of the games from last weekend and then look ahead to to preview this weekend's games. Then we're going to stay with international rugby. We're going to briefly touch up on Portugal and Brazil, who are duking it out in a 2-test series currently, and as well as looking back on the women's international from the weekend as well, where France and England,
the game of the weekend,
played out a bit of a cracker, to be fair. Then we'll briefly round up on all the domestic rugby that's going on around the world. We'll take a look at the Mitre 10. We'll take a look at the Super Rugby Unlocked. We'll take a look at the upcoming Currie Cup and more domestic stuff, Top Tours, Pro 14 and Premiership as well, which returned last weekend. And then finally we'll wrap up with our rugby news of the week. Obviously in that we'll mention things like Christophe Dominici news, which was tragic, a big loss for the game.
Really awful hearing about Christophe Dominici, like from our point of view. I mean, we'll touch onto it in that segment of the show, but yeah, it's coloured the week very negatively. It's way too young, and we're not old men, but we grew, he was one of the stars we grew up with, especially over here in Europe. You didn't really get enough, perhaps, of the Jonah Lomus in that era.
Yeah,
so we obviously had Brian O'Driscoll from Ireland, and he was our guy. But in terms of looking abroad, Dominici would have been one of the heroes of people growing up watching rugby in this part of the world. So it's obviously terrible news
for the rugby world.
We'll discuss that obviously in a bit more depth then, but it does colour the week negatively.
Yes, indeed. But for those who are returning, you're very welcome back. And if it is your first time here and you enjoy the rugby content, please do like and subscribe and share with some of your other rugby loving friends, and leave a comment down below as well, because we do enjoy having a bit of chat down in the comment section.
Absolutely. Listen, without any other ado, I think we're going to try and move on and discuss and get cracking into the segments in the show. And
Indeed.
I guess we'll start with Argentina 15, Australia 15. Wow,
what a game!
What an interesting game this was.
Yeah, it was. It was kind of incredible the way it played out. But there's definitely one side that'll be the happier about it. The Pumas recovered that 9-point deficit at the very end. Really, in the last 10 minutes, kind of they turned it on. Yeah. And compared to the Australia, were kind of all over them for large periods of the game, but couldn't rack up the scores to put it to bed. Really.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I mean, the Wallabies definitely played the better footy. They looked the more skilled, they looked the more adventurous. They were also probably a bit more naive, and they allowed themselves, I think, to be rattled by the Pumas. We'll get into them individually, but in terms of what they were doing with the ball, there wasn't much creativity going on. There was some good hard hitting on defence, and their defence was played into the game by being allowed to make so many tackles in the 22, which they love. And then just in key areas, they were getting a bit of niggle in and rattling the young team. I think that was really the way they went about it. They tried to rough them up and rattle them.
Yes, very much for true.
Yeah, played on the edge, but ended up just
very nearly stealing the game.
Very nearly stealing it.
It would have been an ill-deserved win if they had managed to nick it. But it was very interesting game, because it was like styles make matchups, and even though the tries weren't forthcoming in it, it was obviously a very, very high quality game that was contested between two very abrasive but different teams. They kind of moved at different points of focus for both. And actually, just in terms of that penalty count, I think some of the blame has to go to Paul Williams, who was reffing it in this, because we were noticing it a little. The Pumas in the first half definitely got on his bad books, and the Wallabies kept kicking the corner, even off myriad penalties, didn't quite rack up the score. But one of the things we were noticing is just he was silent before blowing his whistle and only communicated his decision-making process with the players after the whistle.
Yeah,
and when you couple that with the language barrier for a lot of the Argentinian players, like, you can see why they're the ones falling afoul of it.
Yeah, it happened to Australia as well, especially towards the back end of the second half, but it is something you notice with refs. I didn't think he had a bad game, and I actually thought he did a decent job communicating once the play was stopped. He was bringing in the captains and he was giving it this and that and telling people to calm down, etc. All that was fine. But what does set the guys like the Barneses at the moment, who's probably the best ref out there, and Nigel Owens, obviously, in times
even Angus
gone by.
Gardner as well, who's ref a few of these games.
Angus is another one, exactly. Just talking to the players as they go. I know Poit had that famous line that everyone loved: "I'm the player, not the coach." But actually, the best refs in rugby are the ones that do coach the game a little bit, in terms of they know they don't want teams to commit fouls, and so if the guy has his hands in, you say, "Get your hands out. You're not good there." Blue or gold or whoever it is.
Release.
If your hands are good, I'll say he's good. Or if they're not, I'll say get your hands away. And then obviously if they don't, then you can give the penalty. But some refs, often French refs at times, and actually in this instance, Paul Williams, do just look at it, stay completely silent, and then blow their whistle. It's one way to go, but it tends to create a more stop-start kind of game.
It does, and that kind of was what we were citing as the main kind of disruptor of what at times was a very good attacking rhythm from both teams, but it always seemed to end
more
with
from
a penalty.
Australia than Argentina.
More from Australia for sure, but it always seemed to end with an abrupt penalty. And anytime the whistle goes and both sets of players are looking quizzically at the ref to see what he's done, that's not a good sign for the game for sure. So just don't be a mute ref. Communicate. That's kind of the thought on that one. But we'll pivot on just to the teams, because obviously the ref isn't the main salient point of this game. It was a great game contested by both teams. We'll start with technically the home side, Argentina. That was their home fixture, even though it was played out in Newcastle in Australia. But what do they get out of this game? Obviously, a good result that they
they were out. They were in a position where they lost. I didn't love their performance, frankly. Obviously coming off last week, they showed similar amounts of defensive muscle, but they got on the wrong side of the ref. They weren't really able to establish themselves territorially in the game. There wasn't, in terms of the dynamic off 9, in terms of what they were trying to do with the ball. Obviously Cabelli wasn't there, and what I thought Birchenough did fine, they just never really got that much of a rhythm to them. Likewise with Sanchez, that sort of stroking of the ball and having it on
a string.
On a string, exactly. That was missing from them. But it was almost something they didn't really go to. They were kicking the ball a lot. They seemingly didn't want to have it, and then they weren't really giving themselves opportunities. And what was coming of the game prior to that last 20 minutes was like a bit of a bad loss, like where they were the side that was, unlike the All Blacks last week where Dane Coles was slapping guys. They were actually the side being the more niggly, and at times I think there was the footage of Pablo Mitre grabbing, I think it was Panga Mosa's dreadlocks and yanking them and all that kind of stuff. And they got away with that one, but they were getting penalised. They were finding themselves down. They were showing some great defensive hustle, and Australia were sort of playing them into the game by never taking the threes and heaping the pressure on themselves to get the score, which they just couldn't get with those Mataya errors. And so but the way the game played out, all those middle third exchanges were being won by Australia. Argentina didn't have that much purchase in the game, and they were kind of out of it with 20 to go.
And
but
it
then
turned
it started
around.
to
the
tell.
momentum kind of shifted. The Wallabies slowed down, and all that pressure that they thought they were applying in the first half kind of shifted onto themselves because they hadn't applied scoreboard pressure. And fair play to the Argentinians, like that showed a lot of clutch, digging themselves out of there.
100%.
And there were a few tricky kicks. The one from the halfway line that Sanchez nailed to level the score at 15-all. That was a peach of a kick.
Yeah, he still looks like a man renewed to Sanchez.
This is it. Well, when the chips were down, he nailed the kicks and got them back in it. And they very nearly stole the game at the end with just a lovely play from Mitre. Turnover ball in the middle of the field, and it falls to the blind side to Mitre in essentially the 10 channel, his first receiver, and just drops a gorgeous little left peg touch down the touchline for the men to chase, and it very nearly skipped up into Cordero's hands and over the line for a crazy steal of the game. But it's just such lovely footballing skills from such a big unit. I have a soft spot for skills when it's such a big man.
You get a lot of that. But Mitre is world class. Like he's probably the best out there at number 6. He's some of the English back rowers you look at, obviously, but by and large, I think he's probably the best. So from Argentina's point of view, they can be there's good and bad, but there's definitely stuff to work on in terms of Australia kind of melted down. They gave them those opportunities. I don't think they earned much in terms of try scoring opportunities. That play on that last play of the game was probably the best opportunity they had in the match. So I think I think they'll be, obviously happy with the result. They're in the competition, but there is a lot to work on, especially when they have the ball, about being more creative. And they're going to have to be just a little more streetwise in terms of not giving away the penalties, not playing the opposition into the game. Because I think if there's one thing that the All Blacks focus on going into next week, it's going to be discipline after what they did in the last game. So they're going to have to create their own opportunities. I don't think they're going to be giving them to them anymore. But they've got 2 positive results and they're in a position to win the competition, which they've never been in.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So it's definitely a positive enough game from the Wallabies, or from the Pumas, all things considered. We'll move on to the Wallabies, because from their point of view, this is like a one that got away in a big way.
Yeah.
Like they'll just be ruining the missed chances they had, but in the first half especially, like they were all over them. They were really they owned the ball. They were winning the exchanges, the territorial
battle. They were streetwise
battle.
at times. Yeah. They ended up not being so, and that was the point. Like in the middle third, they were very good. They were buying penalties. They were moving the ball around. Pataya was good again. I thought Hodge, despite obviously with the missed kick towards the end, was a bad one, but I thought in his general play he was very good.
Yep.
We got to see a little more of Nick White at his best.
Yes,
moving
running
the ball
a nice
around,
pace.
running that decent tempo, as you say. Yeah, exactly. And I even thought Matt Phillip had another strong game.
He did,
and they were doing well, and it was game management. Then it was just a young team making probably kind of young team decisions.
Yeah, naive. And it's unusual for us. We're normally the ones bullishly advocating going for the corner and going for the try, and we're always on the side of the team that does that. But like the one where it's at its most pertinent is when it's a tier 2 team via tier 1 team, and that's not what this was. This was a game between 2 pretty similar top level opponents, and one was edging it in the first half, and there were 2 periods of the first half where the Wallabies just they milked a load of penalties. The penalty count went way up. They had a load of territory. They kept kind of kicking the corners, and they eventually caved and kicked 3. It happened just around the 20-minute mark, between 15 and 20 minutes,
and
then just before half time again. And to be at 30 minutes, Sanchez kicked a longish penalty and put them 6-3 up, the Pumas, and it was like, wait a minute, it was 30 minutes here. This game, Wallabies have played all the rugby, and yet they're 6-3 down.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it comes from, a lot of the times going for the try is the right idea, and I heard Michael Hooper talk about that, and you have to admire, especially in this time where this season particularly, where attacking rugby is almost at a premium from just about everybody. Most sides are leaning towards their defence, and Australia, to their enormous credit, just went bullishly for the tries, and that's the way they want to win games. But when you look at this Pumas team and what they were doing in terms of what their strengths were, they weren't controlling the football very well. They weren't controlling the territory game very well. They were giving away a lot of penalties. In the middle third, they were coming off second best in most exchanges.
Yeah.
But when it got into their own 22, what they were doing really well is defending their goal line. They were tackling brilliantly, as they did last week, racking up the tackles, putting in dominant physical collisions, fronting up.
All of that just plays them into the game because they love it.
Yeah, they love doing it, and it's you're going to find it very, very hard to get scores. And I think if they look back on the game, they might say, geez, the Pumas were kind of dialed out here. We could have really kicked ourselves into a position where they need to score tries. And that's ultimately what they didn't do. They at 15-6, the Pumas could have gone for a try, and maybe they would have lost the game if they panicked and done that. But they were close enough with 9 points that they could keep working the scoreboard, and they got a couple of penalties in quick succession, and then ended up being back, within a penalty, which they then took to level the game. If the Wallabies had racked up the scoreboard pressure during that period of dominance a little more, if they'd kicked, got 9, what you said, there was 6-3, if they got 9 or 12-6 up, and then maybe before the half got that extra penalty to be 15-6 up at the break, then the Pumas are going to have to come out firing, and if they can edge that third quarter, put more scoreboard pressure on, the Pumas are going to need tries, and that's when they have to come out to play, which they never quite did.
No, they didn't, and it meant you never got the kind of flowy counter-attacking stuff that the Wallabies have been good off. You can kick return and things. They weren't really forcing the Argentinians to try and throw the ball out or come out of their shell. They arrived sluggish into the game and were able to play themselves in by defending their line, which they love doing, and keeping the score down. And then when they nicked the lead at 30 minutes, that's such a big moment for them, because if you're not in the game and you've just made a whole load of tackles and then suddenly you see yourselves in the lead after not really having the ball, then you start to believe that this game is kind of there for you, and they kind of held on to that, and they finished the stronger of the two because of it. Whereas obviously it could have been a bit different there, but for the bounce of a ball, Pataya's little chance on, I think it was around 20 odd minutes, where the little grubber threw from Hodge,
Yeah,
and he very nearly tried.
Yeah.
And like, sure, if they'd gone for the try and scored the try, then
they had another one
then
chopped
it was
off, didn't they, for a forward pass?
Yes,
right?
they did. Yeah,
so
yeah.
they were not far away on a couple of occasions from crossing that line, and just the bounce of the ball didn't quite go for them.
Yeah.
But they did force themselves into those scenarios. I suppose they'd say on another day we might have got that try, and fair enough. Like they're a young team in the big picture. Obviously, there's the dynamic of them being in a position to win the Tri-Nations, which they haven't done in ages, and would be very, very nice for them. But there's also the dynamic of this being, a first season for Rennie, a lot of new blood in the team.
Yeah,
there's exciting things happening in Australia, and they still obviously will get a chance to respond and play the Pumas again.
Yeah,
but by and large, they can reflect on, I think, a pretty positive development for them, and a promising young team coming up, and so they won't beat themselves up too much for this result. The only thing I'd say, Michael Hooper is, as the sort of experienced captain, does need to be a less naive leader of the young team. Really, when you're trying to get the balance of a team right and you have a load of young guys in there, you need your elder statesman captain to be like an authoritative but calm and learned kind of figure. The wise old man in the team who knows what to do.
He needs to know
and sometimes Hooper does go down the blind alleys himself.
He can get tilted in the physicality for sure. He does just throw himself about there a lot of the time, and that can get you seeing red. But I think I'd agree with your assessment. A young team, a naive team at times, but still, like, as far as skills and ambition and intent, it's all there in spades. For sure. So a lot of positivity for the Wallabies, but this isn't quite a positive result. They'll still have to take the learnings from it, because they should have won that game, really. Yeah,
truly they should have.
But we will move on then to previewing this weekend's game between the Pumas and the All Blacks. Again, Argentina technically home, but this is a technicality because it's all playing.
Well, they apparently have annexed a little bit of Australia north of Sydney called Newcastle. That is Argentinian home territory now.
Base camp for the last few weeks. So the game's going to be taking place this Saturday, 28th of November, 8:45 a.m. That's our time over here, and it's 7:45 local time at as you say, McDonald Jones Stadium, which is in Newcastle City, and it's going to be refereed by Nick Berry. Nick Berry, he's been on the touchline for a few of the other games.
Yes, he's one of them out there. I wouldn't say he's the best, but hopefully he won't be too negative a presence on the pitch. Hopefully we won't be talking about the ref come Monday, and then come next week. That's always the hope.
Yes.
The weather conditions are set to be perfect again,
as you'd
Newcastle. 21 degrees and sunshine with some nice breezes, but perfect conditions for running rugby.
Both of these ambitious sides should be hoping to put it through the hands and score some tries this week. We could have a few more tries than last week.
One would hope. We could scarcely have fewer.
This is true. But just as far as the colour of the game, obviously the Tri-Nations has become quite an intriguing tournament overnight, with the last, well, not quite overnight, but the last 2 weeks
has been since obviously Argentina coming in has been magnificent, but this is a great little tournament, and as much as it sucks not having the Springboks in there, and I do understand their reasoning, I think what has emerged is a great dynamic, and we don't yet know the future of the Springboks, but gee whiz, if we get a rugby championship with all four of these sides competitive with one another, it would be some viewing.
It would.
And it already is some viewing, in the sense of this competition being very, very interesting, and all teams on 6 points at the moment.
That's right.
I think the All Blacks on top, but the Pumas with 2 games to play.
That's right. The game in hand is sitting in Argentina's pocket, so it's definitely an interesting one from as far as navigating a tournament's concerned. Both the Argentinians have the technical advantage in that.
Argentina, we'll get into the squads in a moment, but there's suspicion that they're going to make a rake load of changes. They're obviously going to have to front up the All Blacks as a tough test. If they can get a 4-1 defeat here in terms of bonus points, if they can limit New Zealand to less than, I think it's the 3-try rule, less than 3 tries ahead of them, or maybe it's 4 tries, I don't know. But if they can stop them from getting a try bonus and keep within 7 of them and get that losing bonus point, a win would be enough for them next week. So it's in their hands. But from the All Black point of view, if they can get a bonus point win here in 5-0 Argentina, there's going to be nothing they can do about it next week, or Australia, short of absolutely racking up a crazy score either or against each other, which is unlikely. So it's in both sides' hands here in terms of the trophy. And kind of backs to the wall for the All Blacks. It's the last game of the season. They're reeling from back-to-back losses, which is absolutely an unusual spot for them to be. And Kane and Fozzie Bear have been at the media's throats, and the media's been at their throats. And they've been at sort of the fans' throats as well. It was a harsh one. I actually watched the interview with Sam Kane that led to all the chagrin. he was saying what he said, but I understand where he's coming from, and you know, in the context of everything we see, sometimes it's hard to divorce, you know, critique and etc. And they are like a demanding nation with the All Blacks means more, and they always say it's about the team and not the individual.
Yeah.
But you know, when you've got a bunch of guys working their holes off, and I think Sam Cane in particular has done nothing but good rugby, and then to see him getting, like, presumably getting vile criticism from fans, it's important just to rein that in and remember that, you know, these guys are doing their best.
They're doing their best.
Hard-working professionals.
It's true, and they came up against a mighty Pumas performance, and they were a changed side. Like, there's excuses to to be made, as well as absolute lynchings that could happen. But there's no doubt that the pressure is on and the spotlight's on the camp. And with it being the last game, it's now the biggest game.
They've been stewing with this. Like, they didn't get a chance to respond last week. They had to have a bye, so they've had 2 weeks of this
spin doctors
teeth grinding going on. And usually, if you wanted to look at a historical point of view, usually what happens when a Kiwi team has their backs to the walls to that extent, the next game is brutal, and it doesn't tend to matter who they come up against. The next game is brutal. Like, we saw it when they were responding, and like in years gone by, even Richie McCaw teams, whenever they lost the World Cup #1 ranking, or whenever they played France after losing the World Cup quarter final.
That's right. Yeah.
The next game was always something fierce.
Yes, indeed. They want to get wins back.
Ireland suffered it after they first beat them in Chicago. 2 weeks later, bludgeoned to death
in the home Dublin stadium. We know all too well what an All Black backlash can feel like, and the Pumas have never faced it, because one of the things that goes along with your first ever win against the All Blacks is your first ever backlash from the All Blacks.
First ever game against them where they know you've beaten them. They know you can beat them, and it tends to be a brutal thing. But they haven't been great this year.
No, they haven't. So the pressure is on, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond. But then, just moving on to the squads for both teams, as you kind of highlighted earlier on, it's suspected. We got a leak earlier on that
got a leak from our sources from Twitter. I mean, there's a lad, Paul Tate, who's worth following. I think he's America's Oval on Twitter, but he has good updates on the Argentinian team, and he's essentially just talking about the squad, what they're lined up in training, which has, for every game this tour, has mirrored the exact same team that they ended up going with. So we actually have a decent idea, although you'll probably have the squads now when we're talking about this tomorrow, but we don't as it is, because we're here on Wednesday evening, so we don't have the squads yet. But we suspect that they're making 10 changes, that they're dropping the 2 props to the bench and bringing in Vivas and Medrano in a prop. They're dropping Alamano to the bench in favour of Paulos. They're dropping Bruni for Facundo Issa, which feels like a form decision. Facundo Issa,
2 new centres, De La Fuente and Malia in the midfield. We know De La Fuente, but Malia is a new face, young guy,
and a back 3 of Ramiro Moijano, Santiago Cordero, and Emiliano Belfelli with Ezcura at 9, all of whom have good test experience. It's actually like, if you were to tell me just on the face of it, Argentina could make 10 changes here, I'd say, they can't cope. But then you look at the team they've picked. Rake loads of test experience. All the important guys are still there. Your Guido Pettis, your Montoyas, your Sanchez,
your Matera,
obviously, that whole back row, and then even you've got Teta Chaparro and Cadea to come on and bolster that scrum. So it's actually
Bertranu and Carreras off the bench in the back line as well. It's got good impact as well. Like they're in rude health, and we were noting that in the first game, obviously against the All Blacks again. That just looking at some of the guys who weren't togged out, despite the guys on the pitch, and you're going like, geez, there's Facundo Issa now, and he's not involved, and there's Buffelli, he's not involved, and here they are beating the All Blacks. They have rude health as far as depth, and this is, as we've highlighted, like a World Cup camp where they're rooted, they're not travelling. So it seems like part of the plan to try and manage their cardio, because 4 weeks in a row against All Blacks Wallabies is a very, very tough thing to do.
We know from watching Argentina 15s, obviously in a lesser competition, but that Argentina 15 time that runs through those tier 2 competitions in South America, that there is serious depth in Argentina, and any squad of 30 that they assemble, if they're all fit and well, are going to be able to do a job. So absolutely making the changes here makes all the world of sense. For the All Blacks, we don't actually have that squad yet, but there's a number of selection options available to them. I suspect we'll see the return of some heavy hitters, Aaron Smiths and the like, who didn't feature the last day.
That was
or did he? Sorry, no. I think did they haul him off? Which game was that?
No, they hauled him off. It was the last game. Yeah, the one previous previous was the one with Pierre
against
Australia. Yeah. No, they had him on and he was their best player and he was keeping him in, and then they took him off.
That's what happened.
Yeah. Just to remind you there of that one. So yeah, squad management, All Blacks ? We don't obviously have the squad, but there's still a whole load of decisions they can make. We're going like, can Rico come back in and play 13? Is that experiment abandoned? Their centres, we do know the ones that they picked last time were very much a weak link in terms of their offense. Their multi-phase did not click. They were crowding Mo'unga a lot of the time. They were running poor lines, as contrasted with the Argentinian centres who were running nice aggressive lines at the space and finding holes. So the centre is one question mark. They do have multiple options in the back row and in the pack in general, but where they're a little tight is at tight head. That was where they were. It's
Tiro Lomax and Nepo Laulala, so whichever way they go, they're going to be struggling to hold the scrum down. So I expect Tui Pilato and Whitelock will be in there for heft.
Yeah,
it's a question of whether or not they bring back Satutu. Obviously, it doesn't like it in terms of the personnel. There's still a lot of quality in there. It's not the most massive deal who they go for. They can all deliver, but I certainly would like to see someone like Damien McKenzie come back in. I think Jordy Barrett hasn't worked at all this tour. He's been way too bludgeoning and not enough subtlety to him. I think he's a guy you could probably get out of there.
Well, when you have the likes of Will Jordan hasn't had any
Will
minutes
Jordan's
yet.
The other one. He's been on tour the whole time and he hasn't got his chance yet.
No,
right through Bledisloe and right through these two games, and he to say he was in good form would be to understate it some. He was arguably the form player in New Zealand, which was
himself and Caleb Clark were lighting it up in terms of backfield play, and it'd be nice
how
to
well
see
Caleb Clark worked when he got his chance. Will Jordan's another one who's been tearing it up at Super Rugby Aotearoa level, so I would be disappointed not to see him feature, but not necessarily surprised with the way things have gone under Foster.
No, it's true.
But either way, I think it's going to be about, obviously from an All Black point of view, it's going to be about rectifying the things that were problematic. But before we get into them, we are going to just look at the game from the point of view of both teams and start with the allegedly home side, Argentina.
That's right, yeah. So we'll look at the winning conditions for both and just what they want to do with and without the ball. And we'll start with when they have the ball, optimistically, how they want to attack. And just broadly, as we were kind of highlighting in the review section earlier on, they need to be a bit more clinical overall with ball in hand.
Clinical is one word. Like creative is probably another.
Creative is probably another. Like they haven't yet had the experience of being kind of chasing a game, even though they were behind in that in the game last weekend. Didn't feel like they were chasing too much. They were able to. They had the time to kick the 3 pointers.
They made the game about other things. They haven't really launched many attacking sets.
Their defense has dominated most of the games, and actually, in terms of how they attacked, the way they did it in the first game with the verve and the tempo and the moving of the pill, Kubeli set a lovely tempo, and they varied the point of contact so much that even though they weren't quite penetrative, like the one try they got, they managed to get over the top and get a lucky break, but they didn't quite penetrate. But they did probe and they did move the All Blacks around. And then the All Black penalty count crept up, and that was what allowed them to exert that scoreboard pressure. So that is obviously the kind of blueprint of how to go about this attacking this All Blacks, but you can't expect them to show the same lack of discipline or surprise at your physicality. You're not going to catch them unawares this time.
Yeah, they're going to be much better this week, and I think they have to assume that. It was funny in the game against Argentina A, the second game, they managed to rack up actually 52 points against a team with lots of Super Rugby players, etc. We know now, like we suspected before the first game, that's a pretty positive result. Things could happen, but this was obviously a very good team, and that team were probably a class below.
Yeah,
but it shows that they've got tries in them, and we know, watching Argentinian rugby over the last number of years and even watching it at a domestic level, etc., whenever you see Argentina teams play, they tend to be very full of flair, full of attacking instinct, not unlike sort of a French side. Their instincts in the wide channels tend to be good. They just haven't really played the ball there. I think in terms of offering something new to the game, obviously Sanchez's boot is massive and it's great, and
but you actually have Buffelli back in there now. Buffelli's going to think that could help with both distribution and kicking. I think he has more experience than Carreras, and it could get them a little wider,
no question, and it'll help them from a defensive point of view as well. Buffelli's great when he's at his best, but just in terms of moving the ball, I would love to see them really try and probe the outside channels of New Zealand. New Zealand did do a great job in the games against the Wallabies of being very physical and holding their width. So it is tough, when you got a line of big All Black defenders who are highly motivated to smash you. But just probing on those insides and then trying to isolate when the space is there, whenever that line is fractured, whenever they do narrow up, really trying to attack that space and isolating those opportunities, and then failing that, obviously owning the contacts, getting Mitre into the faces of them again, showing them that you're not going to wilt even if they do front up, that this is going to be a serious physical contest, and then moving the ball around within that and all the ways that you
tempo is key. That's what, like, the main difference between week 1 and week 2 with the Pumas is that they didn't get to set their tempo in the second game, but they very much did in the first, which was against this opposition. And as I said, part of that was seemingly catching the All Blacks unawares of just how physical they were. The physicality shocked them, and then the silly penalties came. So I think that's going to be redressed in this test by the All Blacks, so the Argentinians will have to factor that in, that they probably won't be able to milk as many of these penalties. They will have to create a bit more. They'll probably just have to score a bit more with tries. This is probably going to be the equation, and they'll have to be game for doing that. They didn't, like in the first test, they didn't really get their wingers on the ball. The wingers came in field to look for the ball on occasion, and they did, like, that's always a good sign of an industrious winger trying to get his hands on the ball, but the Argentinian back three men work best when they're in the wide open space, and they didn't really get to do that at all.
Even if it's to be the three this week, I mean, you talk about Santiago Cordero coming back into the team, what a superstar he is at the best of times, and even Ramiro Moyano, I believe he's the guy who has that ghosting try against the All Blacks. I think that was one that was scored in Eden Park, where he ghosts inside one and then outpaces another on the wide channel. It's just this lovely flowy S tracking run that he runs through the All Black defence. He's a great offensive player with great offensive instincts and a nice turn of pace when he needs it. They've got very, very exciting players, and certainly getting those guys in space would be huge. And they could do it if they mix up the kicking game and edge their contests. The All Blacks are going to have their hands full defensively.
It's very true. But then what about when they're defending, however? The Argentinians trying to stop this All Black team. They did a good job the last time. Like, obviously their defence has been what's built their success in the tournament so far. To be honest, it's been mostly that. Even
their
though
defence and limiting the All Blacks of opportunities, and that's where the kicking game, like, almost obviously this is when they don't have the ball, but even when they have the ball, the lack of handling errors and the accuracy of the kicking game in terms of not allowing the All Blacks many or any ideal counter-attacking situations is huge. And then you get into this position where you're defending the multi-phase. When the All Blacks have been in trouble this year under Foster, and to be honest, like, we talked about that backlash from the 2016 game, we talked about the All Blacks against the Lions, we talked about them going into this World Cup. When their backs have been to the walls in recent times, they have gone to a power game. And they've gone to try and bludgeon you. So they're going to try, and whoever they pick, whether it's like the Frizzels, the Tuipolotus, the Whitelocks, the Cody Taylors,
Ardy Sevilla,
brutal in the contact, they're going to try and bludgeon the Pumas. They're going to assume and hope that they're a little softer than they were and play much more accurately themselves. But I don't think off first and second phase, they'll try and be sharper off the chaos balls, which Argentina have to limit. But off those phases, I think a crucial element, if they can get out of the line, as they have been doing, and front up in those tackle areas, that's going to be massive. It's a huge step up, not a step up, but it's a huge ask for the likes of Kramer and Matera and Petty, who've put their bodies on the line now for Sanchez 2 weeks in a row, spent 2 games in a row, both games the majority of the time they were defending. And they defended brilliantly physically. And now the All Blacks off a bye week with their backs to the walls, with these brutal ball carriers. I reckon they're going to try and break through them. I reckon they're going to say this is the week. And from an Argentine point of view, you know, the task is very simple, but it's also extremely physically demanding.
It's the same question we were asking last week. Can they keep up that intensity, that pitch that they were at, and the ferocity that they brought? Because that's really the difference between the positive and the negative in the contact zone. Like, all of these guys are big and huge, and these packs are probably similar weight in terms of weight. It's just going to be a matter of will and technique by the end. And as you say, week on week, guys like Matera and Kramer and Petty in very attritional roles, Montoya as well. Like, is there going to be a drop off? We hope not, but defence will reveal it.
I don't think if they spend as much of this game defending as they have the last 2, that they're going to have a hope of winning.
No,
I don't think so. I just think it's very, very difficult week on week to produce that, and the standard is going to go even up from here. And they were creaking at times against Australia, and the dam could open this week, so they have to be very careful about that. They do have to be, I think, smarter in terms of how they move the ball and moving it better and working the territory game and forcing the All Blacks to exit rather than allowing them into your territory and soaking up a load of tackles, which has been their identity so far, but they're just going to have to be careful.
It's a tough ask to do that for a whole tournament, to be honest, and like it's been impressive it's a good big compliment to their defence that in both of these games they've yet to go behind by more than 3 points in the first half. They've actually been in the game duking it out pretty tightly despite defending for large periods of those things, but I suspect this could be the week where they may have to chase it a little, so obviously pivoting just back to their attack will have to be sharper, as we said, but their defence, that's going to be the one that reveals whether they're there to win or there to roll over.
Simple things like what they did to Caleb Clark on week 1. Like Caleb Clark was given sort of the Joe Nolomu against South Africa treatment in the World Cup final, where every time he got the ball there were 3 or 4 Pumas on him. They'd obviously been watching all that match footage and were alarmed by him, so they came out to get him, and they did a good job of it. But he's coming again this week and he's going to be tough to deal with there as well. And as we say, in terms of the backfield coverage, Buffelli in there is a strength.
I think that strengthens them, but both as far as exiting through kicks, it gives Sanchez another option out wider to kind of pivot to. It's big boot Buffelli, as we've often branded him. He has a huge pumping boot, which in a pinch can just get you far away from
and
your
punish loose kicking if it comes.
Exactly, like you can't afford to be loose to this All Black side. We know that. It's going to be Bowden Barrett back there. He's going to run it back with interest and try and link up, and they're all very sharp on it. So limiting those kinds of balls, try and kick on your own terms and exit on your own terms as Argentina, but they'll have to try and man up on defence and edge that kicking territory battle, and then they'll be in the game. I really do think that this Puma squad, with this temperament that they've shown, they could be a match for this All Black
even
side.
With these guys like Facundo Issa coming into the team is going to bring that heft. And absolutely, they're certainly talented enough, and they seem to be well drilled enough and know what they're doing enough, and the All Blacks are desperate enough that if it stays tight in those early exchanges, there's only one side going to be under pressure, and there's only going to be one side buoyed by it. That's the Pumas
for sure. And if you can try and broadly paint them, just force them narrow. The All Blacks kind of, as you say, want to go to that power game a lot of the time in the last couple of seasons. If you can force them narrow and win that collision zone, then the pressure is huge on the All Blacks, and then who knows, maybe you'll see the counter-attacking Argentinians breaking off the pressure rather than the other way around. That would be a massive moment, but they're going to try and create it. Then just pivoting onto the set piece from both sides' point of view, because this is going to be huge. It was huge in the first game, and it was Argentina who made it theirs, really, particularly the scrum, the contest at the scrum. We know that Argentina traditionally scrummage aggressively. We know that Ledesma, as a head coach, was one of those traditional aggressive scrummagers.
The very first thing that Ledesma brought was set piece solidity, and in fact it was the World Cup. We were probably a bit harsh on him in hindsight, looking back in the World Cup, but obviously time will only tell. But what he managed to fix was the set piece. They had great line out drive. They had a great scrum. Unfortunately, they lost just about everything else.
It's true. And a bit of identity crisis themselves. Then when they're caught between, are we the running winger guys, or are we the running winger wide guys but soft in the tight, or are we really controlled in the tight but then the wingers don't see the ball?
And I think Ledesma's right to build from that firm base, and then you can add layers on top of that, and that's kind of what we want to see this week. But in terms of how the battle goes, the All Blacks obviously weakened with Lomax and
it's with Tuamafasi since he's been gone. That is a huge loss for them. We didn't even know. We were complimentary of him in the first few weeks of Bledisloe because he was brilliant and he was up against a dynamic Tupou and all this, but we didn't quite know how important he is to the All Blacks until he goes. I mean, it's kind of like I don't even know if they knew.
He was revolutionary for them. They had been getting weaker in that position, and Offa Tuamafasi has been exceptional. And so him coming in there was crucial in terms of them implementing that power game. And so locking down the scrum is going to be the number one goal. It's why I suspect they'll go with your Tui Pilatus and your Whitelocks and look to lock it down
in the engine room.
It looks like the Pumas are changing it up and unleashing Tata Chaparro off the bench. I suspect the All Blacks will be game for it in the first half. But that dynamic, if the All Blacks opt for they might opt for Laulala to start just to avoid the dynamic of bringing Laulala on at the same time that Tata Chaparro comes on.
Because that's a mismatch.
That is a mismatch. That's danger, because Laulala's really lost it in the scrum at test level. Like he's either getting absolutely heaved up going backwards, or every time we've seen him in recent times he just goes straight to deck because he's paranoid about the power of his opposite number and hence just tries to bring the scrum down.
Not a good sign in a tight head. No. Especially if you're going to try and play a test level or a kind of a power game, as you say. It starts with the scrum. It's very difficult to be a bludgeoning power team without a dominant scrum.
Yeah.
But I think that's what they're going to try and bring this game. I think they're going to try and lock the scrum down, as you say. Maximum goal is just stop the Argentinians, as we say, they kind of drive as an 8 through the 2, and dynamically there's a lot of shifting and pulsing in the front row as they're trying to get an edge with grappling and in the collision zone just after the hit. Post-hit shenanigans go on a lot with the Argentinian scrum, so it's a big job to contain it, and I think once the All Blacks do manage to contain it, they'll fancy that's one of the primary goals accomplished, and they can start to implement the rest of their game. But conversely, if the Argentinians can start getting penalties off, then suddenly the All Blacks are paranoid about dropping balls, and then that feeds into the question of do you offload or not. It all forces them a little more narrow, a little more conservative if you're afraid of the scrum.
Yeah, 100%. As far as the line-out goes, I think things will be a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
The All Blacks did a good job the last time of not allowing the Pumas to get the ball going at all.
Yeah.
And I think they'll be looking basically for that again. And likewise, the Pumas don't have too many competitive line-out figures. It's not an area they go to for their turnover game. Mm-hmm. So I think line-out's likely to be more straightforward, especially I would suspect Cody Taylor's coming back in. I'd be shocked if they went for Dane Coles again after his showing the last day.
Yes, me too. Especially, again, goes to that scrum. He's a more physical guy up there, as well as with better darts at the moment.
So I think with Cody Taylor in there, with Whitelock in there, you're looking at a solid All Black line-out, and the Pumas line-out has had no issues so far. The All Blacks aren't going to look to compete majorly because they're going to be looking at stopping the maul.
Maul defence will be key. Yeah, I think actually for both, because the All Blacks have been looking to get their offensive maul rumbling. They've done so to the Wallabies. They did so a bit to the Pumas in the first test, even as they were trying to work their way back in. That's where they got their try.
That's the only try the Pumas have conceded so far this year it was a quick maul, no jump, straight. I can't remember who the ball was to. It might have been Sam Kane off the top.
It was that too. It was a short. It was a catch you napping kind of play, and they did, and it worked. So the maul defence for the Argentinians definitely has to be sharp. They cannot afford to go behind with a cheap score like that. Like obviously that was a bit. The game was a dead rubber. They were kind of still in glee mode because they couldn't believe they were that far ahead of the All Blacks, and even that try didn't do enough to change that. But if that exact same try is scored in the first quarter to put the All Blacks ahead, that is suddenly major alarm bells for the Pumas side. A Pumas side that has struggled at times to get their offense purring and get it clicking and create the scores themselves. They definitely don't want to be conceding cheap ones on set piece. And then the last set piece is just the restarts, and I think for both teams the MO is the one that we've been looking at most recently, the kind of the global trend of restarts. Try and kick to the corner, try and get it as deep as you can, force the box kicking exit from your own 22, and then set up either an offensive line out in the half or an opportunity to kick return, which the All Blacks will love if they kick it in field or a big boot Buffelli to down Barrett's throat and a chance for him to run back. That's obviously a big part of the All Blacks plan.
Yeah, there's no real value to kicking to recover for either team. I mean, the All Blacks, they want to make the Pumas uncomfortable. They don't want to have them play their defence into it. They want to make them exit. Yeah. And likewise, the Pumas just want to get some territory because they haven't had any all tournament pretty much.
Yeah.
So both sides are going to be launching it deep off restarts.
I would imagine
the accuracy of the kicks and the kick chase is going to be big factor in how well that works out.
How much hang time can you get on them? There are some who are graded at Owen Farrell in the World Cup was kind of showing the way for how to do that exact restart very, very well. And then we'll move on just to the All Blacks and what they want to do with the ball. What are their winning conditions for this game? When they're attacking, obviously they're still struggling to kind of create things in the multi-phase. That's been the prevailing bugbear with this new All Black side, and as you say, it's not necessarily just the new All Black side, it's kind of been lingering a little bit for the last couple of years.
There's personnel wise, obviously they're struggling in terms of, like, you look back on the great All Black side, which this side has slowly drifted from, really, and it's been a slow process. It started sort of in and around the Lions tour time, and then has drifted from there in terms of that great 2015 team. Personnel wise, when you had a team that used to have Ben Smith and
Conrad Smith,
Man Onu, Sonny Bill Williams, like the difference makers that they have in the midfield, Dan Carter as well as a distributor. But mind you, I don't think the issues are at 10. I think both 10s, Bowden and Richie, are great. But what's missing really is that punching element in the centre. The way around that is the dual distributor thing, and whether you get Mackenzie in, I'd love to see it. I suspect they won't. I suspect it'll be Richie and Bowden. But those guys need to be linking up with one another, and they just need to attack. It's not enough anymore with the guys they have at the moment to just say, we trust their instincts, and they're going to be grand. And that's fine if you win your contacts and you create overlaps on the inside, and then they'll finish them. And like maybe that's the plan, and maybe it'll work.
Yeah.
But in terms of long term developing something, they just need to bring in a little more shape. A couple of screenplays where Bowden's playing off Richie.
That's what's missing. That's the main thing that's
missing.
Yeah,
but Bowden's such an ideal second distributor because the guy is a 10. Richie's a threat on the line. The guy next to him's going to be a threat. If you can pull it back to Bowden, he's obviously a threat to pass the ball, but if he's coming onto it at pace, he's going to occupy defenders. Either he can hit a short guy or a long guy. There's going to be space somewhere, and if the defence drifts off, he'll score.
He scored tries like that from 10 and 15.
Yeah, just the creativity and a bit of shape is what we love to see. But I suspect they'll try and bring that power game. They'll try and rumble through the Pumas for the reasons that we were talking about when we were talking about Argentina. They're going to be the Pumas are going to be a little tired, perhaps a little flat-footed. The All Blacks are going to be hungry, and they're just going to look to get more of an edge on those contacts. The sort of Artie Savia stuff that you see.
He was kept quiet in game one. You might expect to see him rumble out in game two with a point to prove.
In that first game, the Pumas were edging those contacts. They were edging the second shove. They were getting themselves in the right positions and not allowing the All Blacks to burst through. I suspect the All Blacks will be focusing on just being more accurate in that area, putting the right footwork on it, hitting them in the right place, getting that after contact shove going. And getting over the gain line
for that. Aaron Smith is pivotal to them for that, because even with all the things they got wrong in the first game, Aaron Smith was keeping them in the game with exactly that, was putting some of his forward carriers onto the ball nicely into bits of space around the ruck. They're playing off 9 a lot these days, as you say. It's kind of a power game, and what affords them that luxury is kind of the accuracy, crispness and tempo that Aaron Smith brings. And you saw when it was TJ in the Wallabies game, it was a little less accurate, it was a little less crisp, and the whole system kind of dissolved around
and when
that.
They took him off for Brad Weber the last day, like that, the moment that happened, it was like they're done.
There was no fight left in the game. No, he is super important to just driving that All Black tempo that they want to create. But then beyond that, as you say, we'd like to see a bit more expansive rugby from Mo'unga Barrett. It's a Mo'unga Barrett axis that we keep calling it, but apart from a few little kick and chase plays or a few kick return plays, we haven't really seen them combine in the multi-phase. Especially, that's where it's been missing. And you think when attacks stall, like the idea, like when you see Australia do it a lot with a lot of speed, you can have those two guys. You can have Richie and Barrett peel to the short side or the open side quickly from behind
Australia
the ruck.
do it so well, but if this is stuff they work on in training, so they're in sync with one another. And for the All Blacks, you get the sense a lot of the time that it's just let the boys play. They'll execute. They'll use their heads up footy, and it's not enough at the moment with the Pumas defense that's killing them. One of the things that is true about the Pumas defense is that at times against Australia, they literally had one man tackle up and then get up, and then he would contest in the ruck, and everyone else would be fanned across the line. And there was a couple of times when they were in their own 22 where they had a 15-man line, literally no one in the backfield, and a 15-man line. So from an All Black point of view, I reckon one of the adjustments they will make for sure is to try and work better kicks in. They nearly got it off a couple of times against the Pumas. It was their most almost threatening moment. But when you've got guys like, Mo'unga can obviously kick it really well, Aaron Smith can kick it really well, Bowden can kick it really well, even Jack Goodhue has a decent boot on him. Like moving the point of contact and moving the ball around, and then varying a kicking game to punish the Argentines for being so aggressive, and leaving space potentially in the backfield. Those can be long kicks, those can be probing, attacking kicks, but they do need to work some patterns.
And they just need to be varied kicks as well.
And just punish the Pumas, put them down
too
in their
often
half.
the last game. It was all they were trying to do that, but it was too often a box kick. And even though Aaron Smith's executing a box kick very well, all you get out of a box kick is a 50-50 chance to catch the ball up there, and sometimes it's not even that much in favour because there are blockers. It's tough to get up there. So varying the point of contact and varying the kicking game. Try and find grass with them. Try and move them around. Vary the trajectory and probe a little. And then conversely, to the point about like Argentina will want to contain Caleb Clark again. The All Blacks will want to try and unleash him this time because he was really kept under wraps in the first test.
They just weren't getting the ball wide enough, and then he was coming off his wing, and all of a sudden it was the Guido Pettis and Pablo Materas of the world that were hitting him, double teaming him. So he needs to be on the wing, and they need to be looking without him to soften up that Pumas defence and then get him on the ball in space. That's the key. You want him 1-on-1 with Montoya or Cordero. That's what you want.
Ideally, that's the scenario, because he'll win that battle. He just wasn't really given the chance in the first test, and that's credit to the Pumas, but it's definitely from the All Blacks attacking point of view. something they'll definitely want to remedy this time. You want to see Caleb Clark making some inroads, getting his hands on the ball in space, and causing the Pumas some problems.
Absolutely.
Then just when they're defending, we'll pivot on. The All Blacks trying to stop the Pumas. They did struggle here in the first test. Obviously, they were a bit shocked by the speed, a bit shocked by the width and variation. Like, it didn't get much further than the centres, but both centres in the first test were cutting nice lines that were checking the line, and they were just off both 9 and 10, kind of doing little pop passes and moving it around. Really a lot of subtlety and deception as well as speed, and from there the penalties came. So, like, first point of focus this week, All Blacks, fix your discipline. Like, the penalty count was shocking and criminal, and some of them were born of pressure. And to be fair, penalties are part of the game. If the Pumas do ask good questions and are banging at the line, and sometimes a penalty will be conceded just because of that speed, that you can forgive. But like the Dane Cole's slap in the face penalty reversal stuff that just comes of being tilted, that has to stop. Check that stuff at the door, because it'll kill you. Like, and it's no way to be. And like the likes of, like, the Locks were anonymous last time out, apart from giving away 1 or 2 penalties at line out time, and the same was true for a lot of members of the pack. They were all kind of guilty collectively and individually. So this will be a huge work on and a huge point of emphasis.
If they can do something, like they back their heft and they back their physicality, and if they can do something similar to what the Pumas guys were doing, because last week the Pumas offense looked rusty as hell.
It did.
They're going to have, I think, the third scrum half in as many
brand new
matches.
centres.
If they can get up out of the line and win physical contacts and impose themselves, that Facundo Isas of the world, if he can come in and start making a rakeload of tackles himself, they could almost out Pumas the Pumas and put them under pressure and get them going backwards and force them to loosely kick to them. And this is the thing about the counter-attacking game, which is really where they want to score their tries. We talked about their offense without it, but last week the Pumas were kicking, or the last game the Pumas were kicking a little bit too much on their own terms, and every time Bowden Barrett got the ball, even if he had space in front of them, he had this line of Pumas coming after him, and there really wasn't much room to work with. But forcing awkward kicks, putting the kicker of the ball under enormous pressure with line speed, and then attacking the pill at contact, trying to create those dynamics where you feel you have an edge on the transition, like actively seeking those out from a defensive point of view is going to be massive. It means better jackal threat from the likes of Sam Cane, etc. But it also means guys in the contact winning your contacts and then attacking the ball, sort of NFL style, batting it away, and pouncing on the loose ball is going to be massive here from an All Black point of view. They need. I think Argentina had like 1 spilled ball last week, and all the kicks to the All Blacks never really get them in. They need to generate some counter-attacking chances if they are going to get a score up. Exactly.
They thought in game 1 they were like, that was another part of their plan, but they think that creating the chaos through a box kick or something was gonna yield some of that. It didn't. So the adjustment has to be made. As you said, the kicking game has to be a varied one, but you do want to put the pressure on the Argentinians, force them to try and attack you, try and create. If they can take a lead early and try and exert scoreboard pressure on them this time rather than be the ones chasing, that'll be a focus. But the defence is kind of there to serve to get the ball back and transition. That's what the All Blacks are about at their core. And to be fair, all of our foibles about their attack in terms of their multi-phase, or all of our critiques even, they don't ring true on transition. They still
got beautiful attacking instincts. Like we're going to talk about Ireland in due course, and our frustrations with their inability to execute overlaps. Like, as much as the All Blacks are struggling at the moment, that frustration isn't there.
No,
if the overlap comes, they'll take it.
Yeah, for sure. But they can't rely on just the Pumas rolling over. They will need to control the game a bit more than they did. They need to be a bit more savvy, a bit more clinical as well, more disciplined on balance, and you're just looking for a more cohesive All Black performance. That's what all the All Black fans want. It's what the All Blacks themselves want, and it's what they'll need to both win this game and finish the season on a bit more of a positive note. But also, they're still in prime position to take some silverware from it, despite the back-to-back losses.
100%. In terms of predictions, do you have one for us?
Yeah, I do, and despite I'm repping my Argentinian blue here, but I fear for them this week. I kind of do. I think the All Black backlash will be real. I hope that it's still that the Puma side, as we suspect, are of such a quality that even with that backlash, it's not a blowout. It's a competitive, nitty-gritty, tight game. But I do think the All Blacks will probably edge it a little. And I think, as you said, the Pumas' inability to kind of really penetrate with their attack probably will cost them, because I think the All Blacks might grab 1 or 2 scores to put them in a bit of arm's reach, and then maybe a few mistakes from the Pumas if they're trying to force it.
Yeah, that was nearly entirely what I was going to say. Funny enough, it's like we often try and disagree for colour. I mean, I do tend to go, like, I tend to like when I'm predicting a game to ignore the sort of historical context and just go with what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing is an All Black team that are not creative and have been struggling to impose themselves at all in games when they haven't owned it physically.
Yeah.
And then you've seen an Argentina team that has been extremely physical and hasn't allowed anybody to impose themselves physically.
Well, have imposed themselves physically, but then not quite creative with it.
Yeah, but if you look at that dynamic, it looks like the All Blacks might struggle, and it could be another sort of tight test like we saw last week. But the All Blacks are still the All Blacks, and as you say, they have the Pumas struggled on offense to such an extent last week that you'd worry for them this week. And I just think that the All Black players are a little better than they've shown recently. Like Super Rugby Aotearoa was the best domestic competition this year, and it wasn't close in terms of skill level and everything else. And that's still in them. And I like to think that they're going to, on the last day of the season, when they're fighting for their coach's life and their captain's life and responding to the media,
avoiding three L's in a row,
that all of that sort of intangible, passionate element that was on the Pumas side 2 weeks ago might actually have flipped over to the All Black side this time. And so that'll be enough. And as far as a margin, I don't know, it could be brutal. Like, if they click, it could be absolutely brutal for the Pumas and they could win the competition. They do need to think in those terms, because of a 4-1 win probably might not be enough. So are they going to be the ruthless, brutal 4-try winning All Blacks? Maybe, but I predicted that the last time, so I don't know. I'm sort of between minds, but I think the All Blacks will win.
I think we're edging towards the All Blacks, but kind of hope I'm wrong, because I would love to see the Pumas do it.
They're both great teams. It's a great match, and it has been a fabulous tournament.
Yes,
and indeed. Certainly the saviour of rugby this autumn in terms of getting crowds into stadiums. It's the second last week now, Southern Hemisphere rugby, but in terms of COVID and everything that happened, we didn't know if we were going to get any rugby at all this year. It has been mighty enjoyable and really has salvaged the season from that point of view.
Yeah, I think so. A great debt is owed to all those teams. Fair play for putting it on, and best of luck for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we move on to the Autumn Nations Cup, swinging our focus back to the Northern Hemisphere. We're going to start by just looking back on last weekend's round of fixtures before we look ahead to previewing some of the weekend's games to come. But it was an interesting weekend of footy.
Yeah, it was definitely. I think all around the world, not the best week for offensive footy, but the tournament certainly taking shape after last week. A couple of big results in the England-Ireland game and in the Scotland-France game that have sort of set the final couple of weeks of this tournament in motion.
Yeah. And
we will look ahead to the 3 games, all of which might be a bit skewed this weekend. But we're going to take a run through them all nonetheless. But we are going to start. I think we have to start by talking about all the big games and all the decisive results that have led us to where we are now. Yeah. Starting, of course, with the opening weekend of the game. The opening fixture of the weekend of the game. The opening fixture of the weekend between England and Ireland in Twickenham, which went...
Oh, I can't remember. I completely blocked it from my mind, so it was bad.
It was
England 18, Ireland 7. Just for those.
It was painful viewing for us, but not unfamiliar viewing. But
in fact, we were kind of your little rattle through last week of all the 5 previous defeats in both club and international colours.
Another one to chalk up to the list.
Make it 6. It was. Very, very disappointing from an Irish point of view. But before we get into the whinging that could go on in perpetuity from an Irish point of view...
You may have to humour us on some whinging, but before you do, if you're an English fan, you might just stay with us for this bit. We're going to talk about England, because we have to talk about England, because they might be the form side on the planet right now.
They might very well be. They're playing some stellar footy, and they really did look superior to Ireland in this game. 18-7 is kind of a flattering result for us in many ways, in terms of just... They could have scored more. They didn't really look to score more. The scores they got were brilliant and broke the back of the game, but they didn't really look to attack us quite the same way.
They kicked most of the time they had the ball. They didn't have the ball much. They allowed Ireland to defend them. I mean, the stats are crazy. 32% possession and 28% territory. You don't really see that in Test rugby, even besides getting dominated. And England dominated this game. But it's just a curiosity, a bit like that Georgian game. that they had on the opening weekend, and perhaps even the Italy game as well. Going back to the Six Nations. They'll say almost like Eddie Jones is kind of setting them challenges within games,
let's defend.
Yeah, let's defend. Let's try and impose ourselves without the ball. Let's kick everything and defend, and working on getting their breakdown accuracy and their defensive accuracy to a pitch and a level where teams can't cope with them.
Yeah.
It strikes me as a reaction in large part to what happened to them in the World Cup final.
Yeah.
Which, if you track their progress over the last 3-4 years, it is all upswinging minus that World Cup final, which was really, it would have been a massive wound both for pride and everything else in Eddie Jones's head and also in the team's head, and it's something they're clearly looking to address in the way that they're going about things, and they're seemingly wanting to be more physical, not to allow what happened to them happen against the Box, and they're running these drills where they're like, okay, we're playing Georgia, this is a scrum drill, and we're going to just use it as that, scrum and physicality drill. Italy as well, let's see if these guys can get anything on us. We know we can run in tries, but let's just kick them the ball and see if they can run in on us.
Ireland, they wear green, they run narrow.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Let's pretend they're South Africans and kick them everything and hit them. Don't let them get into it from a defensive point of view. We don't need to run it, and obviously they took their tries nicely, but it really functioned like a defensive drill for them.
Yeah,
and
kind of successful
my
like that.
Word,
I think it was actually Squidge was pointing out a good point that an adjustment they made. They were box kicking. Obviously, Ben Young's box kick was their main point of exit, but they were positioning either Currie or Underhill just behind the leading chase, so the second line of chase, which was just a nice clever thing, because off kick return there have been a lot of turnovers this year for guys going in, because obviously if you kick it this way, a lot of the defenders or a lot of the green jerseys will be retreating. The guy who kicks it will obviously come forward into contact, but for the guys who are coming back around, they have to kind of swivel around to get in by the gate, whereas if you make an instant contact and then you have a Currie or an Underhill on it, you can get that steal straight away. And I think that their breakdown efficiency was phenomenal from them.
The breakdown was great. But it was patient. Like, a lot of the time they weren't committing. A lot of the time they tried to slow up Irish ball. But I think what was probably the most telling stat from their point of view was just the tackle success rate. When you consider they made over 200 tackles, and they still had a percentage of made tackles versus tackles attempted of like 94%.
Yeah, that's mighty good.
That is mighty. And even despite, and we're going to get into Ireland and the limitations with which they approached it from an offensive point of view, from a defensive point of view, just the ability to make that many tackles, and so many of them dominant tackles, and only getting better as the game went on. At times at the start of the game soaking them up a bit, but as the game went on they just became more dominant and more dominant, and they as the Pumas did arguably to the All Blacks, they managed to wear them down from the other side of the ball. And where Ireland circa 2018 had this philosophy of wearing teams down by holding the ball, the response to that has come in the last couple of years has been an ability to wear teams that do that down from a defensive point of view.
By smashing them.
There's no you've no God-given right to be less tired just because you're holding the ball. You might be
you might feel a bit better because you have the pill, but
you might be exerting more energy for less reward. And that's sort of the picture.
It's tough to carry a ball into a big contact. If you're the ball carrier in a big physical contact, your arms are occupied, you're going to be receiving a shot, and there's a risk of dropping the ball. Whereas when you're tackling, you can just mind your height. Don't go swinging the arm in, but beyond that, just smash them. Physically line them up and smash them.
Personnel wise, they're very strong in the back row. I mean, leaving Jack Willis out was something. But then
Earl off the bench got a couple of steals as well.
Everyone got a steal in that back row, and
Itoji as well.
Yeah, Itoji as well. Obviously, and we'll get to him. But I mean, I thought the ability that Currie, Underhill, Billy Vunipola and even Ben Earl have the capacity in a defensive line to lead the line and be a dominant carrier, to be a second man into the contact area, to shoot and cause problems. They can do any number of things. They can sit back and allow someone to shoot and cover that space. They're really, really gifted defensive footballers, and they all have a tackle threat and a jackal threat. And it makes them just a nightmare to deal with, and it allowed them to be so functional. Like they were at any given moment, one or two of them were given free rein to try and come in on a soak tackle, and at times even had left them exposed, but they weren't really worried about what Ireland were doing. They were just attacking that ball, and they got so much purchase.
Well, they tended to be successful. They, as you say, they limited. They tried to fan out and keep their feet unless they sniffed a turnover, and they are good at distinguishing between a dead ruck and one that you can target and one that you can pinch. And all day, they made Ireland suffer for getting isolated a little and turn them over in crucial periods, and kind of really just wore on the confidence of the men agreeing with it.
Clutch steals as well, isolating those big moments and making a play is as valuable on defence as it is on offence, and England really showed that. And I think none more so actually than Henry Slade. I mean, Irish fans can grumble about Chris Farrell and his lack of sort of finishing prowess when he got that ball towards the end. It was in the second half at some stage, but he got it over the line, and Henry Slade makes a contortion of himself but gets his hand under the ball.
It was a very good
and makes it extremely difficult for Farrell to ground it and keeps it there and ultimately kills the try. And it's a super play and an example of that combination of work rate, skill, temperament,
but also
technique. Exactly. That is bred its way into that England team.
So true.
From a point of view of being dialed in defensively, they were massive.
Some of the defensive chops on all of their pack, but particularly Maro Itoje, man of the match, Super Maro. He was so dominant, and especially going up against the beacon of hope that is James Ryan, a much touted talisman in Irish colours,
captain for the
first time in Twickenham, and calling the lineouts, and it was at lineout and in physical kind of collisions. He's the guy that Ireland were going to try and go forward, and very often it was Itoje opposite him, ready to meet him on the line.
It was incredible. It was time and time again. Every time James Ryan tried to make anything happen, Itoje was there to stop him. And it was in the lineout. Like, Ireland ended up with bad lineouts, and there were some dodgy throws from Kelleher as well as some poor communication, but it all stemmed from Itoje just making perfect reads on Ryan's calls and being on top of him the whole time. So it just it made the whole thing a mess and a discomfort for Ireland, and made a nightmare of it. And then every time Ryan tried to carry, he was being smashed back, usually by Itoje, who was man marking him and outplaying him.
He was on Ryan watch all day, and it worked. You could even have micro plays, like he stole one of the lineouts cleanly, and then the next lineout that England had, Ryan tried to do the same but played the arm, and that's a penalty, England.
He had him by the end of the game, like, he had him turned from comfortably Ireland's best player and leader into actually a weakness. Where, like, the kick to make it 18-0 was a result of Ryan just losing the plot and going flying over a ruck. And the kind of
uncharacteristic mistake you never really see from him. He's quite a level-headed dude, but like
there's only so much
pressure
I
makes
thought it was bizarre hearing him talk after the game, obviously on Andy Farrell's message about how positive it was, because he took a battering. But that was all down to this guy Itoje, who is, for my money, the playmaking out of him, and the fact that he only gets better as the game goes on.
It's the last quarter is Itoje time. Like, he's kind of nearly quiet by his own standards by still just doing everything right and being insanely physical in the first 60 minutes. But then in the last quarter he's making steals, he's making line out turnovers, he's sacking mauls. His maul defence is phenomenal.
He's got better energy than just about anybody out there. But actually this week he was making plays right from the first quarter and still managed to be more imperious in the last quarter. He just grows and grows into games. As a young man, I think he's in his mid-20s, but he's
only getting better.
He's only getting better. And he might be, right now, the best player in the world.
He sure looks it at the moment, just from
the playmaking and the physicality. He's got, marries just that super read of the game with just that awesome freakish athleticism,
and potent combination. He's only getting more savvy as well. Like, he wasn't one even in that World Cup final defeat. He was still in there making one or two plays. It was kind of the pack around him. Some other guys shrank.
He's an obvious choice for Lions captain. I think he's number one. I don't think there's anybody else you could back. I don't think there's anyone else. I genuinely if you're looking at, he's the only guy who's a captain contender who is guaranteed of a test shirt if he's fit. And that's even with Alan Wynne-Jones and James Ryan existing in this world.
And they do, and they're very good, but
not as good. Not as good at all.
No, it's true. He's just everywhere. He was a monster, and he was a proper thorn in our side consistently, but more like a sword in the side. Like, it was death.
He was just sensational.
And then a few of the other guys we have to mention. Johnny May. Just what a guy! What the tries found fantastic. He is such an elite finisher.
Beating Hugo Keenan there was great, but then that second try, and there's a lot of people talking from an Irish point of view about how frustrating it is that it came from our offensive line out, which there's an element of truth to. But you want to know what the real difference is. It's not messing up a line out, which every team does from now and then. It's what the best teams do when that happens. And England, they kicked a lot, But on that occasion, they isolated. There was a
turnover ball.
Scope
what do we
to
do
go
with
wide.
turnover ball? We flick it wide to our world-class winger.
Exactly. And then you want to talk about what a world-class winger is. Johnny May just embodies it in that moment where he just stands up. Chris Farrell, little stutter step, and away he goes. Keith Earls then flat-footed between two men. Gone in an instant. No time to make a decision. Bundy Aki can't get across. Hasn't got the pace. Then he dinks it over Hugo Keenan, outruns Gibson Park,
lovely,
and he's taken the whole
finish.
lovely football finish. He's taken the whole Irish backline out of the game, just with that little bit of space and that little bit of front football. That, like, Johnny May, world class winger,
absolutely
world class winger, right up there with the very, very best.
It gets thrown around a lot. The word world class.
It should be reserved for guys like that
and plays like that.
That's
too often
awesome.
We're seeing routine smash him up, like, oh, sensational carry, world class carry from this guy as he smashed over for an extra try. No. World class is when you do that. You get a little bit of space. You stand up a guy in Chris Farrell who is there as a defensive 13. He's not there as an offensive unit, really. He's there for defensive reasons mainly, and you make him look an absolute fool, and then go on to, as you say, take names throughout the whole back line. It was a special moment. It was probably the best try of this tournament so far. There have been one or two other good scores, but that was just
that was the
otherworldly. It's disappointing that it came against us, and it was a very pivotal moment in the game because it was obviously Irish attack. It felt kind of like almost a 14-point swing in the context, especially from Ireland's brittle confidence that we were talking about earlier. Moments like that are what shatter that instantly. And it was just, what more can you say? The guy's a phenom.
100%. And listen, we have to give them their due. They were sensational. They are sensational. They are in pole position now to move on and beat Wales and then reclaim that win over France, who are obviously going to have to be changed and take a very, very dominant position, winning this cup and moving on into next season.
That's the plan.
Trying to become and trying to establish themselves as the best team in the world. And obviously the real challenges will come when they meet those Southern Hemisphere teams. But they're primed and ready and in a
purring very nicely. He has them flowing, and you just have to tip your hat to it. The better team won unequivocally, and that was England. But there were two teams on the field that day.
What we have to talk about here is what has happened and what is going on with Ireland, and you might indulge us for a little while here as we try and take on what is a bugbear of ours, just personally from a fan's perspective. I feel like we need to vent so that we can park it and move on. But there's a couple of things that we have to look at, because there's almost so much going wrong from an Ireland point of view that it's almost an intimidating task to try and outline it all. I think we're farther off than perhaps we even realise at times, and in other times, not too far off.
There's elements that are almost there, and there are elements that are good, but there are some glaring problems that really are recurring when we meet the big teams.
Well, there's probably two broad categories that you could look at Ireland's failings in, and I would say the first is your basic, from a coaching point of view. What's your shape? What structures have you put in place that are going to work and open up teams, especially with ball in hand? This is where they really struggled against England. What sort of structures are you putting in place, and what tactics are you using to win games? And then the other element of it is just on an individual level, the quality of the plays that are being made, the quality of the carries, the quality of the passing, the quality of the finishing,
the quality of the lines that are cut.
The quality of throwing, the quality of playmaking. Like on an individual level,
and then collectively,
and then collectively, that's like another category and another serious failing. I think just starting with from a coaching point of view and from a tactical point of view in terms of how Ireland are trying to open up teams. I was looking at the game, and there was a lot of different elements in terms of we had so much of the ball, there was so much to see. But there's one sort of illustrative play that I think we don't usually show footage in this context, but we're going to show some this time, just to give you an example of what we're talking about when we say Ireland are being limited. And this is a play that takes place just before you put it up. It takes place about 2.5 minutes into the game, and it starts with a line out about halfway into the English half. And Ireland have it. It's clean ball, and this is an area from which teams like England last year have loved to strike. And we're just going to show you the play first of all, try and put a full screen, and then we'll talk about it after. So here you go.
Run it through. So it starts up. with a clean ball and a hit up in the middle from Bundy Aki, which is obviously nice. Quick ball for Gibson Park, and the line is set, and we take another carry, and a dominant one it is. Nice clean out, good quick ball. Third phase, another carry from Porter this time, and then what do? We sit deep and we kick the corner.
Now,
and just gonna pause it there.
Now, there's a lot. I suppose first instinct you're looking at this is like, first of all, it could pass you by in terms of a play. It's pretty innocuous. Ireland in the opening third of the game were trying to put those probing kicks in behind to put England under a bit of pressure.
Yeah.
But I just want to take a moment. What's missing in this Ireland team, and the reason that we went on 0 points until 75 minutes, in my view, is explained right here. So we're just going to go through it in a bit more detail. Early game, where you're trying to break the back of teams, they have a perfect platform. The line out, which people thought was a bugbear, goes perfectly.
Yeah, this is before everything's gone wrong. It's only 2 minutes in, and it's a perfect clean ball off the top of the line out.
Absolutely perfect throw, perfect catch, 5-man line out, England tied up, ball is given cleanly to Gibson Park.
So we roll that on a little, and obviously, as we said, Bundy Aki is the smash man. He's going to win his contact.
He's got Daragh in support. He's gone smashing through Billy Vunipola, who's out of the line out, the 5-man line out, occupied Currie, gone down, good support from Caelan Daragh, and the ball is presented quickly for Gibson Park, and so we go again. The line is a little narrow there, but Kelleher gets the ball. It's probably a little unsubtle. It could really only be Kelleher or Ryan taking it, but Ryan's there to support. The contact is won, and the play is quick. It's about a 1 second ruck. Yeah. Now, this is the key moment.
We're going to pause right here.
Where you've paused it right there, and this is the screen that we're going to be looking at for a while, because this is what blew my mind when I was looking back on this game. That is what we talked about last week when we were talking about England and the strike plays they've been running that punish teams.
Yeah.
We said, off the top of the line out, first phase Tuolagi hit up, second phase around the corner hit up, both of those contacts won, and then on the third phase you strike.
Yeah.
And this, in this English line that has been much praised and was very good, you see why that talk gets made, because actually everything has gone perfectly. Everything has gone plan A. Bundy Aki won his contact. The line out was beautiful. It was quick ball. It went around the corner. Kelleher won his contact. Lightning quick ball. Gibson Park is presented with this. And if you look here at the English line and the English defence, this here is Johnny May.
Yeah.
Johnny May has come up off his left wing. He's narrowed right in, and his focus is in here on this pod of 3 Irish attackers. Elliot Daly, as we'll see when he kicks it, is actually a little infield. He's probably hovering just on the back edge of the screen, but probably
level with the Irish out half, watching his eyes.
Yes, possibly in behind the ruck. But there is this huge pocket of space in behind here, and there is crucially this man here, Keith Earls, who's a bit of a blur by our view, but what he does have is he has his hands up and he's pointing to that space. And when you look at the opportunities that are there for Ireland to attack, the English line is fractured. There's open field. There's space here. There's space outside Johnny May.
There's space this side of the ruck because Mako's still not folded.
And then on the left side of the ruck, there's Mako Vunipola not back on his ruck in time, and next to him is the other prop, Kyle Sinclair.
Yeah.
And if you're looking from an offensive point of view at the matchups that you look for in a game, you look for 2 props defending together, because as good as they are, they can struggle to close down the space.
Especially if one of them's offside as the play begins. You know, that's a big chance.
So Ireland, off the first good attacking platform that they got in the game, executed their first and second phase perfectly according to the plan and got completely clean ball and fractured the English line to such an extent that there's holes on the open side here, on the blind side here, and in the backfield here.
Yeah.
And then you avert your eyes from the English shape to what the Irish shape is.
What is the Irish shape?
It is bamboozling.
Yeah.
So the first carry, Bundy Aki was supported by Daragh. Second carry, Kelleher was supported by Ryan. This shape here is Andrew Porter, Chris Farrell, and CJ Stander. And this kind of blows my mind. Like, if the carry is for a forward hit up, he doesn't have a support man with him. It's Chris Farrell who's going to have to go in and ruck. There's no option on this side here where Mako Vunipola is. Quinn Roux doesn't want the ball. Caelan Daragh is running around. Bundy Aki is positioned here in kind of the 10 slot, but he's not interested in the ball. Ross Byrne is standing next to him in a pocket kind of situation, obviously lining up the next phase kick. Hugo Keenan's practically expecting a kick return over here, such that we're going to kick it away. And the only man on the pitch who could receive a pass is Andrew Porter, right where English defence is at its most set.
Yeah.
He's the only man who's expecting a pass.
And he's the only one who gets it.
And if you look at what Ireland could do
what Ireland could do to open this up. Doris or Aki could recognise this two-prop situation and try to attack it on the open side. Chris Farrell could recognise that Johnny May is up in the line and call for a mispass, try and run flatter on the outside shoulder of Porter and try and take a good flat pass from Gibson Park, which you know he has in him. CJ could run outside him, Keith Earls could run flat to the line. All of a sudden Johnny May's got to make a make or break decision where he could execute a pass over him and Keith Earls is in that space. You could pick it up from the base and chip it into that space there, and have Keith Earls attack it. You could very well end up with a 50-50 situation if you do that.
Or perhaps more if Elliot Daly is a bit far out. We've seen Ireland score tries off set piece like that before. Tommy Bowe has done one from a Conor Murray box kick. But yeah, they don't recognise, with the exception of Keith Earls with his hand up, they don't seem to recognise that space. And Farrell is a 13 in there, but as we were saying earlier, he's there for defensive reasons more than offensive ones. The passing isn't as good, but also just the recognition. He's not looking for the ball.
My point is that every single player on that Irish line, not one of them recognises the extent to which the English defensive line has been fractured and the extent to which there's space available to attack.
Yeah.
And so you roll it on, and this is what becomes of it. Andrew Porter, by himself, trucks up, Doris gets in time, Farrell gets there, and then pause it when we see the open field there. The English line is once again now completely set. Johnny May is turned on his heels, ready for a kick in behind. The English line is now perfect on the open side. Keith Earls is out of the game.
Hands back down again.
Hands back down. Keenan has gone so far deep he's out of shot, and Ross Byrne is standing in the pocket behind a pod of forwards who can't receive the ball, unable to do anything else but kick.
Yeah.
Roll it on here.
So we do kick it away, and it's a very frustrating look. And then this is highlighted as a positive play, because look, you can see there is a bit of a scramble here. England get a little tangled in their own end goal, have to do an offload and a hurried kick out, and you think, now this is another chance. Kick return. I was begging to see a kick return try from Ireland. What do? We move it into the midfield, get James Lowe on it. He kicks it.
And if you actually look back, Bundy Aki and Chris Farrell are coming to the open field as well.
Yeah. And it's just, what are we doing with Gibson Park and James Lowe just kicking the first thing? It hits off an Englishman, more chaos. There's an element to which this could go anywhere. Nearly Gibson Park and James Lowe nearly converge on it, but it's an Englishman who's there first. The ball goes to deck, and then Ben Youngs arrives at the ruck to pick up the ball. Pretty much where Ireland started after all that huff and puff.
Exactly. At the end, the play started with Ireland executing to a T their plan. That went perfectly.
Yeah.
The play started with an Aki hit up, went perfectly off the top of perfect line out ball. Second phase went perfectly, another dominant carry from Kelleher. Third phase, lightning quick ruck ball, and from that position, within the space of a couple of phases, it's back and England have the ball in the same spot. Yeah. And what the reason that's happened is because what's been drilled into this Irish team is actually what we're going to do is we're going to own the territory game. We're going to put in these little chaotic kicks in behind and try and create chaos ball and dynamics that we win. We do that, but what materialises is that England have the clutch and the hustle to make the play on the ball, to escape. It becomes a very nice play from Elliot Daly in his own end goal, and they get it away, and they recover even the James Lowe kick then thereafter.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is that Ireland are committed to this idea of creating these chaos opportunities and not nearly committed enough to attacking where the space is.
Yes.
Having their heads up as ball players, as rugby players who understand this game and are, top level test internationals, to recognise where the space is and attack it.
Yeah.
Because there was a try there to be scored. On that third phase after that second carry, there were a few areas where Ireland could have attacked and maybe gotten a try out of it.
Yeah.
And they failed to recognise that and ended up putting in a probing kick which didn't amount to much. And they went on not to score until the 74th minute.
Yeah. And it's a microcosm. It's a play that's worth 1,000 words, because you were in the process of typing up in the prep almost 1,000 words on that play alone. And obviously there are other moments. Keith Earls had a lovely skip pass at one point that he was dropped into the midfield to throw the skip pass, and little moments like that were trying to build things. But this play itself, 2 minutes in, we never really carried with the same ferocity that we did or intent as with this play. And you can just see this all, as you say, the main thing is the first two phases went to plan. So what was the plan after?
Yeah, and it's such a crucial time in the game as well. If you're not going to attack them off a strike play off set piece in that opening stanza, when are you going to do it? And it's such a massive opportunity missed, and it sort of puts a different look on this idea that this English defence is insurmountably good.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a very, very good defence. They're very, very difficult to break down. But off set piece in particular, if you can sit down the defence for a couple of phases in a row and generate quick ball, there's all kinds of opportunities. And I can't help but think from an Ireland point of view, a nation that likes to think of themselves as tier 1 top level, should be in the top 4 in the world, so says their mission statement on the IRFU.
That's right, yeah.
That any one of the top sides would have done a better job of recognising that. Your Australias, your New Zealands,
your Argentinas,
even Wales at times had a better track record for recognising where a try is in a play, and Ireland are just way too structured, way too ingrained in what the plan is and the idea is, and there's no varying from that. There's no heads up calling of a play, and there was a play there made. They actually opened up that English defence in 2 phases without even realising it, and then they allowed that moment to pass them by, and it's those moments where the defensive line is fractured that you have to try something and you have to strike. And it was an opportunity missed for Ireland.
It really was. It was a painful one to analyse, but that was just one little microcosm. It's where our foibles and where our gripes with this Irish offence are really founded is exactly that. There's no heads up play, and as I was saying, like we watched Leinster, we're Leinster fans as well. Only the other day the kids are out, they're throwing the ball around. The first attacking set they had against Cardiff at the weekend, they peeled to an open side, found a gap and found space and found a try in a single phase or a couple of phases. Like it is happening, even in Connacht as well. Connacht are throwing lovely passes. They were tearing Zebra apart over the weekend. Like there are ball players in Ireland and there's attacking rugby in Ireland, but it is not filtering up to the top side. They seem terrified to play when they're in the green jersey.
That's one of the key issues, is that structure, that they're way too limited to that structure, and you saw it by and large in that play, almost in a nutshell. I mean, there were other examples, like just the fact that Jacob Stockdale's try was really well taken, and it was a nice little dink from Burns and a lovely finish from Jacob. But when the English line were playing in that second half, there were a lot of occasions where that space was in behind, and we were very late to go to it. So there's those tactical issues still remain, and still the focus tends to be on this bludgeoning, pre-planned, pre-packaged offensive set that ends in a bit of a pressure kick or something, and it just wasn't enough to break England down, and certainly isolating where the space is an area that coaching staff have to look at. But to go to our second point briefly before we wrap up this segment, I just wanted to talk about like the one of the key reasons why the offense is struggling as well has to be on the quality of the individuals involved and what they're doing. And like you were looking at that second half, like obviously the pod structure sucked and there wasn't that there, but some of the carrying was really, really poor as the game went on.
Static
is the word.
Like just
Ross Burns standing
still.
deep, catching the ball standing still, shipping it all on standing still to a forward standing still, who then tries to do something with the ball against an English defence that's running. So basic things like the quality of carry, running onto the ball, getting a good pass in front of them, and then putting a bit of footwork on to best a defender in those tight contacts is another thing. Outside of Caelan Daragh, who I thought did manage that hustle pretty well, was something that was by and large missing from the Irish attack. And there was all kinds of these little microcosms of players really lacking that top level quality in terms of what they're doing with the ball, both in the dynamism of the carry and the quality of the pass. I mean, you highlighted that Keith Earls moment. Ireland had to move Keith Earls into centre in order to get someone who could move the ball to the wide channels, and that's a frustration in and of itself. Keith Earls is our best option for that. He had a lovely play against Wales, but it juxtaposes, like if we wanted to run more footage, there's an example of Keith Earls throwing a pass to the wide channels to try and get it outside a fractured English line, and the ball is just too long in the air. It
wobbles a little and it's too long in the air.
It sits deep, and by the time it's caught, the defence is there. If you counter that in the second half, in the first half with an English opportunity, Henry Slade had an opportunity to spin the ball wide and whipped it, fizzed it off his left hand, not a bother on him, from more or less the same spot as Keith Earls did, and
just a crisper, faster pass.
Went right to Jonathan Joseph, and away he went down the wing because Ireland couldn't close the space in time. And certainly if you were a neutral watching Ireland, and you weren't familiar with Irish rugby, and you weren't committed to it, a casual observation you would make is these guys just aren't that good. They can't really move the ball. Their passing is unclean. Everything is slow. They can't really operate at speed. That is in a nutshell why they can't compete with England.
No, it's true, and it's also that's one of the final points I'll make, as well as the skill, is just the tempo that Ireland look to play at, even when all things go to plan, it's too slow. We are a slow team. We don't like moving fast, and it's a pain because a lot of our new personnel, as we were saying, or a lot of these younger guys are more comfortable and more effective at speed, and yet they are slowing down in a green jersey. There's quicker ball being distributed around the provinces than is happening in a green jersey, and part of that does go to the point on skills. I don't think they're confident enough to operate at that speed, which is a problem. That should be what's being worked on.
Well, that's it. Like all you can tinker with all the things you want, and you can try and put teams under pressure. I just don't think you're going to be able to cope if you can't execute a try when it's there.
No.
And that's what's killing Ireland at the moment. And it gets worse when you go into the red zone and watch them bludgeon from there, petrified to move the ball at all. Like and another example, like you want to look at the difference between Ireland and England as well, is like Johnny May taking that try. He gets that ball, like that's a playmaker. That's a world-class player. And Ireland are lacking for those at the moment, especially in those wide channels. I mean, as good as Keith Earls was and is, he was arguably one of the best backs in the Ireland team last week. He had that little break, and it was a nice little break, and it nearly set up a try. It probably should have, and really the chance being missed is on what happened afterwards, where there was no structure and no shape, and the ball got instantly turned over when it should have gone wide. But I mean, in that moment where he gets the better of his man, he looks up to try and see, because Chris Farrell's running a tracking run, and then the pass isn't on because it's being covered, and so he tucks his head in, and then just as he edges the contact, the English defender drifts away and Chris Farrell is free, but Keith Earls just can't get his hands free. He doesn't really look up, and the ball doesn't go, and you're just seeing the top teams get those passes away and finish those chances when they come, and that's what England did with the world-class Johnny May, and so from Ireland's point of view, just on a personnel, from the perspective of personnel, getting guys much more important than tactics and all of that stuff is just getting guys on the field, not just being physical enough for test level, but being sharp enough and creative and skilled enough to play at test level, where they can finish tries when they're there. And that's something that's missing. They didn't score a try, but until Stockdale came on, and that was a consolation score. They scored nothing for all of that possession. That's incredible.
It is incredible. It's nearly an effort to do that. It's so bamboozling was it to watch. But like obviously, like other elements were good, like the dominant collisions. The fact that going back to that play we highlighted, like there was a lot good in what Ireland did as well. That's where I understand their chat saying that a few errors this and it wasn't as far off as maybe they suggested. There's some truth to that, but what they are missing for it is that they should be culpable for missing those tries. I don't even know if that play is going to come up on the Monday morning review or whatever.
It could pass you by in an instant, but that's the point, is that you should really be looking at that. Like, you can use the bludgeoning carries to open up the space out wide, as was done, and that was done to a T there. And they used the first carry, second carry, opened up out wide, not identified by anyone on the pitch apart from Keith Earls. But nobody in a distribution role.
You have your 13 there on the short side between two forwards, and he's not making a play on it. He doesn't recognise it. It's there are systemic problems with it and skill problems with it, and broadly as well. They're looking to play too slowly. It plays into the English hands. They are trying to out physical a team that's bigger and stronger than them, and that is fundamentally silly from a tactical point of view. But skills as well. Just there's a lot wrong with what Ireland are trying to do with the ball these days, and hopefully it changes soon.
Yes, indeed. And listen, now that you've indulged us,
we will park that.
We're going to have the video timestamped for all of those who aren't interested in hearing us rant and rave about Ireland, because we will do it to an endless degree. We could almost spend a podcast on it. But I think the broader point is congratulations to England on an awesome win, and we will move on from that game because for the sake of our sanity.
There were other games that happened as well. Wales beat Georgia 18-0. It was not a game for the casuals, this one, more for the purists. It was absolute deluge in Parky Scarlets. It really affected things. Wales, with their changed strip, couldn't, as we were looking, like the back three was delicious, but they didn't really see the opportunities with ball in hand that we would have liked for them, and as such the score was kept down. Wales stuttered and didn't really put in a fluid performance, or even controlled a performance. But
I thought they controlled the game. Like, they didn't put in necessarily a controlled performance.
No, but
they were always in control. I never felt that the result was in doubt. No, they managed to build up that 13-0 lead.
Kind of feels more on Georgia's inability to score, as we had highlighted last week. They are still struggling for any scores, and you're not going to win games when you don't score any points, and this has happened again to Georgia, because Wales weren't that impressive. Sheedy on debut had good and bad moments, but it was a little frenetic, a little chaotic sometimes.
They weren't that impressive, but they weren't that pushed either. I think they'll be quietly happy with some of the things they worked out. I thought Samson Lee coming in was excellent.
Did improve
Wyn
things. Wyn
Jones, Samson Lee and Elliot Dee looks like the front row going forward. Much more solid at both set pieces. Obviously it's only Georgia we're talking about, but they did see off the Georgian threat. They rode their luck at times, but they did see it off. And then they went up the other end and scored a lovely try for Reece Webb, which was the highlight of the game.
It was.
Which was well executed in wet conditions, opened up the tired Georgian defence and put a nice marker and ended up running out. Like in a game that, you look back 3 years ago, Georgia nearly pipped them in the Millennium Stadium.
Yeah, that wasn't happening this time.
Yeah, to see them off in the wet weather and make sure that there was no
and hold your own and win some scrums.
Get some scores on the board and open up enough of a gap to win the game.
Just also get back to winning ways. That's probably the most important aspect of this game, is that Wales won. From a Wales point of view, that's what they needed to hear. They're coming off the back of a win last weekend, as opposed to the last however long it's been. It's been a bad run of form, and despite the fact that it was Georgia in the rain, they will be very, very happy to get that monkey off their backs.
100%. And Louis Rees-Zammit on debut as well. Congratulations to him. He managed to bag a bit of meat.
He did. He looked dangerous whenever he got the ball. It was just they were kind of frozen out there. The conditions made the focal point elsewhere, and it's a good sign for a winger on debut when, even in a game like that, grab a bit of meat,
And listen, they found themselves in premium field position a majority of the time. They edged the important battles they had to edge against Georgia, and given the wet weather, I think they'll be happy to park that and move on as well.
I'm sure so.
Yeah, also congratulations to Johnny Williams on debut, a guy who had testicular cancer, so coming back from that and debuting for Wales,
story,
making Test rugby is good, and he looked all right as well.
He definitely did.
It's more of a positive week for Wales than they've been accustomed to having.
It's true. Congrats to Wales, we'll have to say. And then just briefly from a Georgian point of view, again, the physicality is good, the tackle area good, the scrum, their game, they'll scrum all day. Scores. They need to get some scores on the board. They are struggling with territory. They are struggling with exits all the time. But they really cannot put things together to get over the white line.
There's a few things, like the Georgian model is always going to be. At the moment, it's not going to be wide offload to buggery.
No, they don't have the personnel.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to look to edge the contacts in the tight. Now, there is scope for them to move their forwards a little wider, but by and large, they're going to be attacking in pods, edging contacts, and looking to get over the gain line and recycle the ball, move at their tempo, keep edging the contacts, bully their opposition, and end up grinding them down and grinding the scores out that way.
Good plan.
It's not a bad plan given their attributes. It's one that we've seen have worked for them. There's a few areas that they're really struggling with at the moment to be able to capitalise on it.
Yeah.
One of which is a consequence of the year that's in it partly, but also their sloppiness, is the breakdown efficiency on offence. They're giving away penalties at crucial times by going off their feet or in at the side. They're not rucking efficiently. They're not entering from the gate and holding their feet. They have the physicality to do it. Technique wise, it's a failing for them. Likewise, the scrum. I think Nariashvili has been some servant, but they've really, in terms of the scrum penalties that they used to generate, I mean, we're looking at them now and going, they can still compete with the tier 1 scrums, but that is actually a tremendous drop off from what they were doing a couple of years back, where even in games against the likes of Wales, the scrum was just going burp. Like, it was Georgia were all over it, and teams have made adjustments and teams have got better, but their scrum has eased off, and interestingly, that's not true at under 20 level, where they still, as an under 20s team, are monstering every opposition they come
across. It's bred into them, so it will be a factor in their thing. But maybe some new personnel.
Nariashvili at Loosehead is a guy who's been there forever, and he's a guy they're going to have to go away from. But I mean, it's just those slight things that are costing them. The other thing is, obviously, we talked about their discipline on offense, but just in general, the penalty count is going against them. They lost it 14-7. That's a bit.
They're not endearing themselves to refs. And part of that is the slow play of what they're doing, coupled with, as you say, the officiating of the offensive breakdown doesn't suit Georgia this current year. They will have to adjust for it. Their kicking needs to be better though as well. There's their game management. If you're going to play that way, it's 10-man rugby. There have been many teams that have done it effectively over the years, but you really can't do it without good dynamic kicking of the ball from 9 and 10.
Yeah, and it needs to come from kick chase as well. They had a few decent kicks, but their kick chase needs to be better, and they need to not give away penalties on that and go up in the line and make their tackles. It was a little better against Wales, but still needs to be a lot better going forward.
Yeah.
I do think that Luke Pearce rode them quite a bit.
That's going to happen. Same with Nige the week before.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot. I was looking at the Welsh cleanouts. That was what bugged me, because the Georgians were getting pinned for everything, and then there was 4 or 5 instances where the Welsh guys were just gone off their feet and it didn't get pinned. But they do just tend to annoy refs, and likewise actually the penalty that went, the crucial penalty just before Wales got the try to seal it, that went against Gogichashvili, the backup loose head, seemed to me to be just wrong, and it went against them. They had a scrum in the Welsh 22, the penalty went against them, and Wales went up the other end and scored. So that they're at the stage at the moment where they need all of those breaks. They need to get lucky. They need to get the rub of the green. They've had poor preparation. They're not playing that well. They're going to need a lot of breaks to be able to compete with these tier 1 sides, and they're not getting them at the moment. But it is a problem that they're going to have to rectify themselves. I would give a shout out to Becca Gregadza.
Yeah, we did before the game. We told him to watch. Told someone to watch him. We nominated Tipprick. Yeah, he was phenomenal. He was great on either side of the ball. He was a dynamic ball carrier, always keen.
Parise-esque out there.
He is making Parise-like plays. Yeah. He was under high balls and stuff as well. Becca Gregadza, big fan of him. Yeah. And then the other game of the weekend we'll swing on, because well done Wales again one more time, but Scotland 15 France 22, a big game in that particular conference of the Autumn Nations Cup. It's kind of a deciding one now. It was a bugbear of France, their 1L of the year, coming in Murrayfield in the Six Nations, ultimately probably costing them the championship and Grand Slam, which might have been. So they were never going to take this lightly, despite the tournament that's in it, and despite the rotation being imposed on them. They did target this game, and they were sluggish at times, but they managed to win it.
It was definitely sluggish. It wasn't a fluid French performance by any means. There wasn't much fluid rugby going on at all.
Sure, it didn't help that Dupont wasn't great with ball in hand. He wasn't at his sharpest. His best plays actually came on D. He made some hassling, harrying, physical kind of interventions that were good. But he seemed to be on a different wavelength from a lot of his runners on transition and stuff, and it kind of didn't quite click. And when it clicks, it's beautiful. So when it's a little bit off, you do notice.
Absolutely, and they definitely suffered for that. I thought they were rattleable, and the Scots kind of gave them as good a go as they could. But the French, their pack generally stood up well.
They did.
I did think that players like Camille Shah and Dylan Cretan at times were making mistakes, and it did feel like they were, for every good play there was a bad one, and they did let Scotland back into the game, and they did let Scotland keep levelling the scoreboard. I do think they did a good job away from home of keeping the pressure off themselves and putting it onto Scotland. I actually thought Jalibert's drop goal was dead on the right thing to do,
and well executed as well. It was neat.
They didn't want to heap the pressure onto themselves. They didn't want to do like what Australia did against the Pumas. They just wanted to exert the scoreboard pressure, having lost there the last time. Put Scotland under the pressure. Don't try and go for all or nothing. Just edge it, and they were managing that, and in the end it was a ding dong battle with lots of penalties conceded and neither side looking fluid, but for one beautiful set piece play. And listen, that you gotta hand it to them, because that was a gorgeous play.
It really was.
Gail Fiku taking the ball flat to the line with Ntamak running in behind, or Jalibert running in behind. And then that lovely little ball to Rattez coming from the blindside wing and just opening them up with speed, because he came into that hole from a mile away, and before the Scots could see it coming, he was through it. And then from there it was just an easy try, because you got Vakatawa picking a line on your inside, and he's just not going to be stopped.
No, he's not. It was all you want.
Beautiful
from
and
this
simple, but quick rugby, well executed,
and a worthy game winner of a try. It's nice to see a try win a game.
With the degree to which teams are struggling in the multi-phase, strike plays off set piece are going to become invaluable to the way the game is trending at the moment. And so to see that one so perfectly well executed, it was a game-winning play that deserved to win the game. The Scots couldn't respond. And
even though they had their chances, and France didn't quite put it to bed, they had their chances to do just that, even after that try, and didn't quite execute. So there's still room for improvement with this French team, which is what's exciting and a little scary from an Irish point of view. But that's kind of good. It's nice to have France back.
Oh yeah, they look good. It's a hell of a way for this particular squad to cap off their season.
Yes, now they're rotating back out to the top couture, and it's kind of a new squad come in to finish this tournament. So we'll look forward to seeing some of that as well. But well done, France. From Scotland's point of view, it wasn't to be 6 in a row. No. Unfortunate, because they were damn close to that first time since 1990. It would have been nice.
Yeah, I mean, they could have snuck a draw there at the end. They showed some good physicality and some good hustle. They converted their penalty opportunities pretty well.
Yeah.
But they failed in large parts to offer enough to threaten the French. I mean, I thought that they were trying to edge it physically. And a bit like the Ireland game and the England game earlier in the year, they managed to achieve physical parity with a pretty big pack, which is a great statement. But they just, without Finn Russell in there, without Adam Hastings in there,
without Rory Sutherland at scrum time, I thought as well, big
factor. I mean, that was something I thought they would still be on top in the scrum. I actually thought it was pretty even. Scotland edged it at the very end, and then France had a couple of penalties given to them before that. It was pretty even overall, but they weren't able to exert themselves in that area.
In the same way that they had been with Sutherland there. Yeah. And especially without Finn Russell or Hastings in there. Once you're only getting parity, it's down to you to be more clinical with the ball you're getting, and sadly they just weren't.
Down to them to match what France had done. And listen, we actually got a bit of grief for giving Duncan Weir a bit of grief last week, so we have to be careful with the Scottish fans about what we say. But they're weaker with him there. I don't know if they have a better option, but with Adam Hastings out for the season, a different backup to Finn Russell would be desirable, because the offense just doesn't operate at all with him there.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. And actually, some of the blame goes to Ali Price for that as well, because they played a lot off 9, and I didn't think he was particularly crisp or accurate. I don't think they set any real discernible tempo throughout. I think it varied from moment to moment, and they didn't quite know what the plan with the ball that they got was, and it spoke to just a lack of cohesion. And even though their centres are very, very good and played off each other at times very nicely, it didn't quite gel, and it isn't quite gelling. And I'm not particularly convinced of Duncan Weir's credentials at top level to control a game.
He's a club level guy, and he's thrust in there. And listen, the Scots will say, listen, he's our third choice, we're happy to have him.
It's true.
And I don't know that Stuart Hogg moved in there or Peter Horn are viable at all. It's kind of discouraging that that those might be the only two other options, but from a Scottish point of view, so they're going to have to find ways of working offensive opportunities and taking them without much creativity going on in the back line. But certainly, like, another distributor to help Weir out might be something they have to work in, because as good as it is that they're competing in this way physically, it is frustrating that they can't do what they've been so good at doing under Gregor Townsend and move the ball. Marrying those two is the key to taking the step up to the next level for Scotland.
And they're still not far away, and obviously, as you say, it's 2 10s down, and they're still competing and duking it out with France, and they were very close. They had their moments in this game, but it was a little static, a little more disjointed, and France took the try, so they couldn't respond, and that was it.
And unfortunately for Stewie Hogg there at the end,
the clutch moments from Captain Stewie keep coming
up short. You look at the 3 L's on the season as it now is. I mean, every one of them, Hogg drops it over the line against Ireland. Hogg gives England the match-winning try against them in I believe that was that Twickenham?
Was that Twickenham? I can't remember earlier in the year, but it was a nip and tuck game until that moment.
It was in Murrayfield, but it was in the Lashons of rain, and it was nip and tuck until Hogg messed up a kick in behind and gave them the try. And then this time he has a chance to rescue it and kicks it out in the full. And that's discouraging.
This is obviously not good for Stewie, who is obviously, he's come off a very good season in club colours. And he is. I mean, he was pretty good in parts, but it was little moments like that are no good at all.
I do think that they should also, just in a final note, footnote on them, in a lock, I miss Ben Toulis and Grant Gilchrist, and I'm not sure if they're injured. If Scottish fans want to tell us that, I was looking to try and find out if they were. Didn't seem that they were. But rotating, I think, Scott Cummings has been a good servant, but he was pretty poor, pretty average on the weekend anyway, and Sam Skinner off the bench isn't really giving the desired impact. They're both solid players, they can function at test level. Like I said, they didn't lose the pack battle. But just mixing up, especially Grant Gilchrist, I would say,
Yeah,
getting
he's
him
been
in there.
brilliant for the last few seasons.
He's a playmaker.
But a combination of him and Gray seems like a very balanced, possibly their best balanced one. And then if you have Tulis off the bench,
I think with the depth they have at lock, they need to stop going with the same guys every week because they can mix it up.
Yeah. Well, you saw what South Africa did at the World Cup. They had 4 uniquely talented locks, and they just rotated them.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
an area of strength that they're not fully using, is the depth that they have in that position.
Well, they're only recently getting this depth, and they're usually plagued by injuries. That's normally the Scottish narrative. So maybe it does take an adjustment time, but there are positives to take even in that defeat. They weren't blown away. They were more than held their own. And sure, look, they probably have a key fixture coming up against us, Ireland, to wrap off the season.
Which one they're certainly hungry for with the bye week coming into it.
Exactly.
Listen, just before we wrap up this review segment and move on to this week's fixtures, I just want to look back on the last week and actually include the Tri-Nations in this because it fits my narrative to do so. But I mean, you look at the 4 big Tier 1 tests that took place last week. The try count in them is something stark. Australia and Argentina, no tries between them.
0-0 there, yeah.
England bested Ireland by 2 tries to 1. Wales had 2 tries to Georgia's none. France had 1 try to Scotland's none.
So that's a grand total, what is it, 4 games and 6 tries?
Yeah. Not great. Not kind of the numbers we're used to seeing in recent times in Test rugby. What I'm wondering, is the law changes around the breakdown area, the more lenient refereeing that we're seeing for guys in the poach position,
getting instantly rewarded.
Yeah, and the much more stringent refereeing around offensive cleanouts.
Yes.
Is that change really stymieing and causing offenses to really not be able to create anything and not be able to generate any real momentum because the poach is so easy to get and the clean out is so easy to get wrong, that it's taking that extra second off attacks and stopping them from being able to create, and it's something that we're seeing all over. Or is this a coincidence or a temporary thing that's going to be rectified and not something to be worried about?
I don't think it's fully coincidence. I think there is a correlation. I think that's pretty much exactly what's happening, but what I would say is the breakdown officiating, the changes that were made, I think are necessary ones, and I think there will be a betting in period whereby adjustments just have to be made, because you can see actually Schmidt ball in Ireland was a good example of how to resource offensive breakdowns very, very diligently and very effectively and very technically.
Mind you, if you look back on some of those games,
some of them would have been
tight for Leinster rucks in that era is just shoulder down.
It's a different way of officiating these days for sure. But I think there will be with an adjustment that will just come with time. People getting more used to the new techniques. Because there's a kind of hangover from those things of big tired locks coming flopping in on the offensive breakdown and killing the move ultimately. Yeah, that is going to happen until it doesn't. Teams are going to learn. It was the same with the high ball stuff. There were a lot of yellow cards when the collisions in the air there were new laws to do with it. The first few weeks there was seemingly every other week there was a collision in the air that resulted in a yellow or a red card, and people were going, is this killing the game, all of this stuff. But then teams have slowly adjusted to that, and now it's just changed the way things have gone, and I think that'll be the same for this. What I would highlight actually, one of the things that I think does need to change, and it's an active change that is creeping in rather than an actual world rugby officiated kind of line, which is what the offensive breakdown is the crossing law. Crossing and obstruction. That is being officiated more and more like rugby league, whereby if a guy runs a hard dummy line and it holds the defender, and if he makes a little bit of contact with the defender, that's being deemed crossing.
Even if he doesn't sometimes. Crossing is now, it is almost ref like rugby league. If you're ahead of the receiver at all, you even sometimes get it with someone running a screen that's a little disoriented. Sometimes the guy runs it and the player takes it and it's just instant crossing whistle. And that's something that's crept in where 10 years ago you didn't used to see it.
No, and I don't care for it.
I don't think you should be allowed block. It's not NFL, and you're obviously not allowed to take guys out. But running dummy lines and all that stuff, I mean,
options. What was the old Brian O'Driscoll line? It's they're not dummy lines, they're options. So you're running the guy who's passing the ball has 3 different men he can hit, and I think that has to remain in the modern game because defences have become so organised and so wide. You need to allow some leniency for the attack to try and run these deceptive shapes at speed and try and sit down the defence.
If a defender sort of buys the wrong passer and steps in and hits him, and then the attacker runs into the space where he was, but the first guy was ahead of him at some point. If he's not actively blocking the run, I really don't think that should be awarded as crossing.
No, I think it shouldn't, and it
days,
is being these days. And the one instance it hasn't was a Mitre 10 game that we were watching a while back, where the ref gave like this beautiful kind of bit. He was talking to the TMO, he was looking at it. It was typically, like we were saying, it was a strike move on the multi-phase where a guy ran narrow at the 3 kind of forward defenders and sat down. The guy at the very end, number 22, I think he was the substitute 10, just came out of line and hit him, and the ball went behind him and into the space he went, and it was a try was scored on that very phase, so they were TMOing it, and the ref just summed it up going, he's like, no, it's the defender who's bought that entirely. He's hit the wrong man.
He's made a bad read.
That's what he
said.
Yeah,
and he I think we mentioned this, but he added insult to injury by going over and explaining it to him as well. No, 10's made a bad read there. He's made a bad read. That's not crossing. Bad read.
Yeah, and that distinction was correct and proper, and I'd love to see it more often, because I think the key difference. Those are 2 points. Like the macro is not a lot of tries are being scored. Defenses are on top. You're seeing it. England kick the ball away a lot and defend and only operate with 30% possession and dominate the game, which is
Pumas as well.
The Pumas as well doing something similar. Obviously, that's not a trend you want to see continue in perpetuity. I think the offensive clean-out is having an effect on it currently, but I think that will be adjusted, and it is a World Rugby edict that's being brought in for good reasons to benefit the game in the long term.
Well,
whereas the crossing law is
adjustment
creeping in.
Like the 50-22 rule comes in.
Could be.
Teams get way more sharper with attacking kicks, and then as a consequence of that, defenses slip back, and then maybe it opens up again.
Something like that.
But these things do tend to be cyclical, so I wouldn't overreact to them. And like I say, there was at least one moment, as we pointed out, where one try should have been added to that number of tries that were scored on the weekend. So that was just down to
sometimes it's on the offense to execute. There are tries out there to be scored, but there weren't that many this weekend. But we'll pivot on.
We'll move on at last, and we'll look ahead now to this week. And unfortunately, we start with some negative news. There is, as we like to remind all of us, there's a cancelled game between Scotland and Fiji that was set to go ahead this Saturday, and that would have been. I'm just sort of thinking like how. Because this Autumn Nations Cup has been characterised by a lot of sort of slow rugby, a lot of wet weather rugby, and a lot of
blowouts. Not competitive games and not engaging games, and it's true. The neutral won't be sold on it. Amazon's investment isn't well founded there.
Yeah, exactly, and that would make you worry, because I really would have faith in this competition going forward. I don't think it's the stopgap that everyone else thinks it is. I think it's something that could long term replace what we have going in November right now, which is these meaningless fixtures, and actually ascribe a bit of meaning to things. If you could have a tiered system, we've talked about it as well. Like a bit of silverware would be no bad thing,
but a bit of Fiji would have been nice too.
Yeah, I mean, it would have certainly helped make the case. I mean, remember how good they were in the World Cup and how good value they were for every single game they played.
Every single one of their pool games was one of the games of the tournament. We had it mentioned at the time in our coverage of it. It was just Fiji involved in anything. Fiji versus anyone is a class game of rugby, and that's on Fiji.
And listen, if we got a Fiji game against France and a Fiji game against Italy and now a Fiji game against Scotland, if we got those games, I think the feeling about this tournament would be very, very different.
I think so.
And it's a real shame. But listen, we can only wish Vern Cotter and his men and all the Fijian team the very best,
and a speedy recovery, and hopefully they'll be back in ship shape and ready to take on Georgia next weekend. In all likelihood it'll be those two in the final. They'll have to recover from these consecutive 28-0 defeats though. Jeez, that's going to shock any team.
They're bizarre decisions, but now it's all chalked off because it doesn't matter now. But it's endlessly disappointing, and important to remind that what this tournament could have been, what so much could have been were it not for the virus. But listen, and look, from Scotland's point of view, the week off is probably no bad thing with their injury situation.
Gets them primed and ready to focus on probably Ireland as the challenge that has come almost certainly.
I mean, they're a team trending very positively, and they can reflect positively on the season, and now they have one more game against Ireland, who they lost to earlier in the year but competed with. They'll be keen to try and put up a big fight. But I think no matter what happens, they're a team that's coming, and they're definitely in pole position, and we look forward to seeing them next week.
And likewise Fiji, look forward to seeing them on the field
absolutely
at some point soon. Right, so we'll swing on to some of the games that are actually happening this weekend. We're going to start with the first game of the weekend, which is Wales v England, which is undoubtedly the marquee fixture of the
Oh,
weekend
yeah.
from an
Are you
Autumn
kidding me?
Autumn Nations Cup point of view. It's going to be taking place at 4 p.m. That's local time to us, GMT, and Park E Scarlets is the Welsh home for this Autumn Nations Cup, and it is going to be played out there again. Hopefully it's not quite as torrential as
It's
it
not
was
to be. It's not
last
to be
time.
as bad. It's not to be as bad. It's to be a little nicer. Hopefully some clear skies, bit of a breeze, but some temperatures in the single digits. But that's to be
nice.
expected.
That would be nice. Good. Like if it's clear and still, that's as good as November ever gets around this here. This
I
part
think
of
it'll
the
be a
world.
little windy given where it is, but I think it'll be
take
all
that-
right.
take that over
Decent
last
footy conditions, I think.
One of the caveats is it is Roman Poitin, the man in the middle, the man with the whistle.
Is he getting better? Rowan Pot,
Maybe.
he was like, he used to be a bit of a catastrophe. Like you go back to 2013 and that Tri-Nations, and even the 2012 Pro 14 or Pro 12 as it was back, which lingers in our heads.
Yeah,
and then the Lions tour in
Lions tour of
2017.
2017. That's not that long ago.
No,
man.
it's not.
No, he has destroyed some.
He definitely
big marquee
has. He
fixtures.
has catastrophes in him.
Yes, he
we'll
does.
say. And
And
hopefully,
to our point that we made earlier in the show about communicating, he's sometimes okay at it. But
he's getting better.
He's
at
getting
that.
better at that aspect.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
sometimes can be a little wrong. That's
Sometimes.
just wrong. But hopefully not this
Yeah,
time.
in terms of colour, like this is a fixture which obviously, it usually has a bit of fight to it, little bite, little
That's
needle.
true.
Wales tried to bring it against Ireland, but by and large the bite has been at a minimum in this competition.
We haven't really seen it. As you say, with Wales it was there, but it was inaccurate. It was just ill discipline. That's like there's a distinction between niggle and in just ill discipline. That it's a line that Wales have tried to toe and not quite got the right side of in the PVAC era, but they definitely will. This fixture historically is well, it's a proper rivalry, isn't it? Like these two love to get stuck into each other, love to absolutely smosh each other, and it's normally quite a low scoring but quite a physical contest in Six Nations. When it comes about, that tends to be the shape it takes.
The problem, though, obviously, is from a Wales point of view, and the discrepancy between the performances and the results of the two sides has been so stark that one wonders whether the niggle and the rivalry will be enough to close it out. I mean, from a Wales point of view, they started against Ireland by trying to bring that edge to the game, like they have in Ireland games gone by, and then Ireland sort of outplayed them and they really didn't offer anything, and so that just pittered away into nothingness, and they didn't really have anything beyond that.
Yeah.
So that probably can't be their goal. But I think the dynamic is going to be, can Wales, keep the score down and make it tight and make it scrappy,
and then strike,
and then potentially we have an interesting game on our hands.
Well, the way they've ended up winning the games that they have against England in the last kind of decade, it's been to and fro and tit and tat, but it tends to be large periods of English dominance, punctuated by a breakaway Welsh try in the games that Wales win.
Yeah,
that's how it can go down. So,
and they're still pretty good at taking a try when it comes, and they do need to embrace that.
Well, you can look back to earlier this year. They scored 2 tries in a game against England, which they lost. Both of them were off first phase. One was kick return, the very first phase of the second half, and the other was a nice little strike move off a set piece with Bigger going in. So they know their way to the try line. They just need to be sure they're in the game when they get there, because that was the issue earlier this year. They kind of weren't.
Yeah, 100%. And that, obviously dealing with English physical would be a massive. In terms of the squads, we don't yet know, unfortunately, shooting this on Wednesday evening, who each guy is going to go for. But we do have some squad updates from each side. Wales will be without Ross Moriarty for the rest of the window, in fact.
That is unfortunate.
And there's been question marks without assurances on the relative fitness of Navidi, Tipperick, Falatau, Johnny McNichol and Liam Williams. Now I think most of those guys are expected to make it. There was some talk that Navidi might be back this week. I think Falatau is kind of on the edge of it.
McNichol looked like a bad injury, didn't he? It looked like he had a broken rib or something.
They don't quite know, but I don't think McNichol will feature.
Probably
anyway.
not, no.
And then the other one obviously is Tipperick, who has the HIA from that nasty shot he took.
That's right, and he was definitely unconscious on the pitch last week, and hopefully he's made a speedy recovery, but we don't, as we say, quite know just yet.
From an England point of view, they have named a 35-man squad for the game, which, you can pick a lot of combinations from 35 players, England, But interestingly, Cowan Dickey back, Harry Williams in there as a guy I'd love to see them get in a tight head.
Exeter tightness in the tight,
and Jack Willis comes in as well, and I
He's
wonder
earned
if they'll
that,
deploy Jack Willis this week after the back row doing so well last week. Could it
like
be rather Eddie Jones to start Jack Willis and have him be ferocious as well?
Yeah, see, this is it. They just have such clamouring for places and such quality, such depth of quality in a lot of areas that this 30 odd strong squad for one game is obviously more than enough to feature for the game, but it's just there are more guys left out of that squad too who are quality. They are in rude health as far as personnel is concerned, England, and this is a game they'll be looking to kind of steamroller through and march on towards a title.
100%. We are going to just take a quick preview of this game from the point of view of each team, and we're going to start with Wales.
Yes,
the home side on this occasion out in Clonethley. In terms of what they want to do with the ball, we've seen bits and pieces of sort of the PVAC system that was there in Scarlets.
At its best, it can look flowy like Scarlets, but a lot of times that's coming off first phase or chaos phase kind of play. That kind of speaks more to the good instincts of the Welsh attacking players rather than the system or the shape itself. And for every little positive glimpse we've seen with ball in hand, we've seen at least one or two defensive lapses that have let the opposition, especially a top quality opposition, just take the game away from them.
It's been the physicality that they've struggled with more than anything, and they took Nick Tompkins out to try and cope with that. But when Tompkins was there was actually a nice bit of
spark.
There was some spark, and I think they will need some spark to beat England. There's also some nice touches, like I remember the try they scored against Ireland this year. I think they lost that game, but Alan Wynne-Jones had a lovely touch where he got through the line and got his hand back inside.
Yes, lovely big goal followed.
Just getting those big rangy forwards in the wide channels and moving the ball to them would be an area that you'd look to. They've struggled to cope physically, and like what we were talking about with Ireland against England, there's scope to get outside them if you fracture their line a little bit and then move the ball, and I think Wales are more likely than Ireland to find the space if it's there and get it into the hands of some pretty dangerous back three players.
It's true.
Louis Rees-Salmon, very exciting.
Yeah, even in an absolute deluge and a game that was not built for wingers, and him on debut, he managed to grab a nice score against the Georgians last week. So there are little kernels of optimism and positivity even in these Welsh defeats, and the fact that they, albeit against Georgia, they ended that losing streak. They did. It's now over. You can no longer say X amount in a row with regard to Welsh losses, so that's parked. And now this is just a golden old rivalry, and they have home advantage, albeit without the crowds. And I hope they'll look to get after England. I would be very disappointed to see an ill-disciplined and disjointed showing from a Welsh team, and by the end a disinterested one, because that would really... It would kind of be one of the funeral nails that you could hammer in this tournament as far as the teams just not taking it seriously properly. But you want to see Wales try and go after England, try and score against them, pressure them.
Launch off set piece. I mean, we've talked about that today as well in terms of teams struggling to get offense off. Some of the most valuable possession is off clean set piece, and if they can secure good line out ball in particular and launch off it, and not even scrums, if they can ever get their scrum solid and set with their new front row in there, if they can launch off it and work a move a la France last week,
there's gaps.
There's always going to be gaps there to try and exploit. I think a crucial area as well with the ball is going to be the kicking game. It always is when Wales meet England. Both sides have been physical. England have been kicking everything.
Yes, they have. Everything. Well, sure, actually, even with the last time they went out, the two teams in the Six Nations, England obviously have myriad different options. They opted for Ford, Farrell, Slade. They're most kicking-y and expansive-y of centre midfield partnerships that they could go for, and they sat deep and moved it, and they kicked a lot of ball. Both sides do kick a lot of ball in this contest.
And like the way the dynamic has played out in times gone by is neither side blinking, just waiting to edge the kicking battle. And if Wales can win that and edge that territory battle, that'll be a huge avenue in the game for them. But it's a big job. It's why you'd wonder. We obviously only touched on squads, but the decision to make it 10 that everyone's talking about over in Wales, whether Sheedy gets the nod after a lukewarm debut against Georgia, my instinct would be Dan Biggar. I know Biggar has been struggling for form, but he's
Still the best 10
Still the best
Wales.
10 in Wales. It's a similar situation to Johnny Sexton in Ireland.
Yeah,
There
there's
really isn't
a lot of people
better
calling
option.
for Johnny Sexton's head, but it's like, who's better?
Yeah.
And that's the same equation for Bigger.
Yeah,
It's
and Bigger's by far their best kicking forward. He's the most likely player to step up and put together a really solid kicking performance and win those kicking exchanges against England.
He's
It
also
might give them an
their
avenue in.
toughest 10 in terms of making the game about that, and these are invariably physical and gritty things. The man doesn't shy from contact. He's not shocked by a big physical English smosh.
Yeah.
He'll more likely get up and put in a good play in response. He has that kind of temperament about him and that physicality about him. So yeah, I think he's, for more reasons than one, the right option for this game. But beyond that, they need to probably sit a little deeper than they have been and try and reach the edges. Like, they've had success in years gone by. Some of their scrum halves, whoever's in the scrum half jersey, it tends to rotate in Wales, but they've grabbed that line from the inside attacking trail line. When Wales do sit deep and move with ambition to get wide, they can find the extremities of this English defence. It has happened in crucial moments over the last few years, so that's got to be a big emphasis in their attack, as well as you say, attacking kicks varied, not just the box kick from 9, because none of their 9s are particularly proficient at it, but Bigger is a very good kicking option. Liam Williams, if he's in the backfield, is a very good kicking option.
Even Nick Tompkins has nice kicks
Nick
in him.
Tompkins,
And it's like we
Grubbers,
say with everyone, varying it is crucial.
Yeah.
The English line needs to be checked. It's going to come and be ferocious. And the only way you can do that is being successful, and the only way you can be successful is with variety.
So
And,
true.
so
if you're telegraphed,
exactly. The big bombs will be crucial, and certainly if they could win a couple of them, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Likewise, picking the corners out and pinning them back in territory, and likewise chipping it over the top. There is room and there's scope for heads-up rugby and isolating when the English are leaving their backfield uncovered.
Yeah.
And for a team that kick it an awful lot, I feel like their defensive setup is vulnerable to their own offensive game plan.
Yes,
and,
probably true.
So weaponising some of those attacking kicks against them is potentially an area of success for Wales.
For sure. And then when they're defending, it's kind of the flip side of it, isn't it? Like, you need to front up in the collision zone first, which is always the first port of call.
It's a curiosity, isn't it, though? Because England just have not, we talked about this with Ireland last week as well, and England just did not go there.
Yeah.
They did not go to the contact with the ball. They kicked it, and then the couple of times when they had chances, they moved it out wide and scored out there.
Yeah.
It's a big job. In terms of Wales, they're a little perhaps softer in Ireland than Ireland in that area.
Yeah,
and
so
I
England
wonder,
may try and punish them there a bit more, isolate a weakness that is probably there in terms of the physicality, the raw physicality of this Welsh side. That's been what they've been lacking for, and England have that in spades.
Yeah.
And we haven't quite seen it in the whole autumn cycle, by the end of the Six Nations right through to this Autumn Nations Cup. We haven't really seen the English working their offence as much. They've seen offensive kicks and offensive defence, but not actually out and out offence apart from turnover ball and a few glimpsing moments.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll be different this time. For sure, Wales need to be expecting it and need to be ready to match it. But then also, things like the kicks, those are going to come at them. It's vital that they secure those 50-50 balls. Box kicks from England, all of that need to be defused. If Liam Williams, the moniker, bomb diffuser, defuse the bombs. A lot of it will probably end up in the middle third.
Make it scrappy and disrupt English ball and get them kicking on the back foot is the crucial thing here. And what's also going to be vital is just their midfield defence, which has had holes punched into it all season long. And if they go with Nick Tompkins, it's a brave call, but he's going to have to step up on defence in a way that he hasn't so far in his career. And likewise, Watkin needs to get out and be physical.
I think it's just whoever's there, particularly this autumn, but this year in general, there has really been a lack of clarity. Sometimes they're shooting and sometimes they're folding and sometimes they're retreating and fanning out, and other times they're just very often disjointed and they're very often leaderless in the defensive line. You can see that. You saw that against Ireland. Some of the purchase Ireland were getting with some of these not even loop plays, but the hole that Johnny Sexton went through in the first quarter really shouldn't have been there. And when you look at the two Welsh centres, neither of them is communicating, neither of them are in a cohesive shape. One of them's further out than the other, and it's who's leading the line here? Who's actually calling this? Because no one seems to be, and that obviously has to stop, has to be improved upon, has to be impressed upon
for them to have any chance.
And it means delegating the role. They need to make a call, even if it's bigger from 10 to lead the line. Someone needs to, because that lack of cohesion will be punished and will be spotted and executed against by an English team if that's what they're presented with.
One would think, for sure, and that's definitely important. And not likewise the forward battle, making a scrap of it is going to be very important for Wales. To look at the set piece,
which will possibly be pivotal with a lot of kicks, and if it's a little windy and a little wet,
Yeah,
we could see a lot of this.
Wales will look to Big Samson Lee and Elliot Dee as well coming in with Wyn Jones, which I think now it started off as none of those guys being first choice. I think they all are first choice now, given how badly the other guys went.
Reece Carey's showing us, seen him out of the jersey.
Yeah, maybe Thomas Francis, but on the evidence of Exeter stuff, could come back in. But I have to say, I wasn't impressed with Thomas Francis.
No, neither was I.
He's never threatened the Harry Maguire jersey in Exeter, and actually I saw Exeter have made a couple of tight head signings.
There you go.
So I wonder if the writing's on the wall for Thomas. And actually, the way Samson Lee scrummaged last week, he's probably the guy. He's the form guy.
He's the better scrummager for sure. And it's like, what's a tight head lock for? Scrummaging. Ask a Springbok fan, they'll tell you. He's not there to pass the ball around. So like a set piece is pivotal, and it is Wales who are under pressure, because England are an aggressive scrummaging unit. They are a dominant scrummaging unit. They are a heavy and physical one.
They've brought Harry Williams back into their squad.
They brought a few Exeter men in, Cowan Dickey as well. They scrummage so well.
So good.
They kind of like Exeter have a nearly Argentinian-esque scrummage where it's spearheaded through the two, and the big stocky physical two can take it, and they all scrummage as a unit. It's an intimidating prospect for Wales. It starts with don't drop a lot of balls, but it does end up being you need to lock the scrum down.
Yes,
avoid it if you can, but try and lock it down and move it quickly on your own ball.
Being able to launch off set piece can be vital for Wales, and England could look to disrupt that. England also a line out. I mean, their defence last week, a lot of shtick was going to the Irish line out, but the defensive hustle of especially Maro Itoje, and in terms of reading the lineouts, like he made shy to James Ryan last week. Can he do the same to Alan Wyn Jones?
Well, it is one of the marquee matchups in terms of elite lock forwards, elite line-out play. Yeah. You look no further than Alan Wyn Jones and Maro Itoje, and these two line-outs meeting each other. Like going back to the World Cup, Wales had the second best line-out in the whole World Cup, second only to the Springboks, and they were the only team in that World Cup to steal a line-out off the Springboks, and that was Alan Wyn Jones. So you have all of that kind of stuff to marry in with the fact that Maro Itoje is in phenomenal form, and the English line-out is a quite well-oiled machine, and their hustle on disrupting mauls, actually both of them, because Alan Wyn Jones has the telescopic arms as well, the defensive maul chops from both of these teams, and the niggle and the just intrusion into other teams of first phase ball is always there, and it's going to be curious to see who edges that battle in the first half, and then who gains supremacy and ultimately takes it in the second as well. I think it'll go to and fro. I think both will have moments, and there'll be plays got off on either side, but the winner will eventually emerge in the second. But it's a great battle.
That's for sure. I think that's about some of it. In terms of England and looking at things from England's point of view, certainly with the ball, like, will they be looking to change anything? It's been sort of a curiosity. We've talked about England's winning conditions, and last week we spoke at length about their set piece strike play, and they never really went to it. They just kicked the ball and defended, and it was almost, as we said earlier in the review, almost like Eddie Jones was a
tackling drill.
Yeah, it was like a drill within a game. Like Georgia was the scrummaging drill and the physicality drill. Italy was just a kicking drill. Just kick the ball away and see if they can break it down. There's no point in running at them. You'll just run through them. And Ireland, something similar, just a defensive drill for those tight defensive carries, like as a response to what happened against
tackle
South Africa.
Jackal drill. It's the old tackle jackal.
And listen, it worked for them. It's working for them. And I wonder as well, like Eddie Jones has made a big deal of talking about the team that kicks the most wins the game.
Not necessarily true.
That's what he says. That's how Eddie Jones believes it. I don't
know if he believes it. He says it anyway. Yeah, sometimes he says things.
He said it a lot, but I mean, they've certainly made it their mantra this autumn. And is that going to be more of the same? Kick the ball.
Can we see a kick
own
return
the kicking
try?
game?
Like, certainly of all the opposition they've faced, and they've done that too. They did it to Italy, which is obviously like they could have beaten Italy a million different ways. They did it to Ireland. That took a bit of defensive chops. They had to make their tackles. Ireland, they're big and physical, but they did. I think doing it to Wales is risky because Wales's multi-phase hasn't been as good as their instant counter-attacking strike. So if you kick loosely to them, they might punish you for it. So I would suspect.
Also, their defence has been so weak. It's like that's what would blow your mind. Like the defence on the wide channels from Wales is so poor. I would definitely love to see England mix it up a little bit, and like if they have this guy Ollie Lawrence in at 13, who was physical enough in the Ireland game, but perhaps get enough opportunities to show what he can do. I think that 13 channel could be an area that they really look to expose, and their lovely flowy attacking system, when it's at its best, is a joy to watch. And they went to it a few times against Ireland. You saw some beautiful passing from Slade and from Farrell, and obviously Johnny May is a killer on the left wing. But just working those dynamics and working the wide channels against Wales is an area where they're pretty soft on defence, and you can get through some tackles and really start to build up a momentum.
Just
with ball in hand.
ask some questions with the ball in hand a little more.
Wales will relent if England force them to make a lot of tackles.
I think
England are more physical, they're also sharper, have really slick offensive players, and I would like to see them keep the ball in hand this week. I think they've mixed it up a lot, and I think it would be an interesting message in terms of Eddie Jones sort of toying with his food a little bit in this autumn series to win a game a different way than the way that they have been winning games.
There's definitely scope for it. As far as then defence is concerned, like, they could lean on the defence again, as they have done. Like, their defence is ferocious, it's physical, and it's playmaking all the time.
The
Their
best
heads
plays
up,
they
it's
make,
heads up defending. It's great.
Underhill, Currie, but mostly Maro Itoje, and it's just an extraordinary footballer. And if Wales want to run at them in those areas, those
might
guys
be
will get
finding
them.
a blind alley a lot of the time.
Ireland never really tested that 13 channel with Ollie Lawrence, and Wales might, and I think it is a job, whoever they go for, whether they mix it up and change it up in the back line as well. Wales, I would like to think, with Wayne Pivac in charge, a Kiwi who likes to run the ball, are going to be looking to access those wide channels, and are going to maybe
they
try
have
and
dangerous wide men out there. They should be trying to utilise those weapons, Reece Sammets and such.
It'll be their biggest test yet from a defensive point of view. They obviously only shipped the 0 last week and didn't ship anything against Georgia, and I don't even remember what happened against Italy, but it was brutal. But I mean, from an English point of view, if they want to defend, Wales are going to offer a lot more, and it's going to be a much bigger job for their backline on defence as well as just their forwards who are making most of the
spread the
tackles.
load a little more. So it's just a different test, and I wonder what the prudent decision is. My instinct is to just back themselves with ball in hand to try and get the job done, but if the more recent evidence is to go on, if it's not just a tactic for each game, if they're planning to really kick the ball and impose themselves on D, like we highlighted in the review segment, their setup on box kicks is great, where they have either one of Currie or Underhill or both in the second chase. So the first man goes in to kind of make a mess with the competitor or make the tackle, and then the first man in is a Currie or an Itoje to steal that ball. Like, they have worked in those innovations that make kicking really a good way to exert pressure and to try and work their territory game. But if they really want to reflect on it, like, that Ireland team were so unclinical last week, and they only had 30% of the ball because they were kicking away so much. If they'd kept it enough to even have 40% of the ball, they could have racked up 30. You know, like, and you got to feel like Wales are a bit more porous than Ireland at the moment. Maybe the answer is to back yourself.
I think that's right, but I also think from a defensive point of view, when they are defending Wales, the key is to start on the outside and work in, and not give Wales space in the wide channels and force Wales narrow.
Where they will lose.
They're not running off each other that well in those channels. They're really looking to get it wide. Their wingers aren't coming in off their wings very much, and very often the picture that's presented, if it's shut off on the outside, a guy like Bigger is either going to kick the ball or go right back into trouble into the contact area. And when their forwards, while useful players, are not a match for this English pack, that's where they want that battle to happen, but the only way they can make it happen is by shutting out that outside, and that's going to be a vital area for them to go to.
So good.
Also, watch the backfield, because Wales will chip it in there. I think they will do a better job.
Pendulums will need to be alert to that.
Not even the pendulums, but like when they're flying up out of the line, that Stockdale try that they conceded was a little nugget of what their defensive system is leaving. And if Wales can pick up on that, they've just got to have an eye on it.
Bigger has a little chip in him, to be honest.
They just have to watch it.
To be honest, the Welsh are more likely to execute than the Irish in that kind of space. But with all that said, what do you think's going to happen? What are you leaning?
I can't see Wales doing anything. I did I was very
sorry to our Welsh subs.
I was ready for them to show up, to rock up in the match against Ireland a couple of weeks back and
historical precedents and all of that.
Yeah, just put some pressure on them and humble Ireland a bit. And they offered a bit of niggle and a bit of bite, but they were so off the pace on defence and attack. And England is such a step up even from that. And even last week with the change side against Georgia, they're operating on minimal confidence. They're not moving the ball very well. they're not managing the contacts very well, and England are just a massive step up for them, and I can't see it going any other way.
Then a big win.
I mean, there is always a Welsh win out there. They're much better than they've been playing as players.
That's true.
But in terms of what I think will happen, just based on the evidence I've been seeing, I think England have to win this. I think they might be, as they were against Ireland, not like better value than the scoreline suggests England in terms of their dominance of the game. It could end up being like a 10-point win, or even as it was in the Six Nations, a 1-score game because of a late Welsh comeback. But I think ultimately
it's rare. These games are rarely blowouts, but England do seem a bit too good. Yeah. Like if Wales are to pull off a what would be a shock win, albeit a home one here, it would be shocking given just where England are at versus where Wales are at. But it'll have to like channel a bit of that Puma energy you were looking at 2 weeks ago, where it's all pride and just real ferocity and like getting in the faces of England and making them uncomfortable, upsetting their rhythm, trying to make it an absolute scrap in Parky Scarlets and edge that with a few key strike plays. I would love to see them do it. I know they have it in them, but I'm only giving that around a 10 to 15% probability rate at this point. I think it's much more likely that England are just a bit too good for them, a bit too strong, grab the key tries where Wales possibly don't, and probably edge it by a score or two. Maybe a 2-score game.
Around that, I would say. Yeah. An easy prediction, but I think that's what will happen. Maybe they'll prove us wrong. It's happened before.
It has happened
before.
Too
many called the Pumas win against the All Blacks before it happened.
We weren't one of them either.
Anything can happen.
It's true. But that is definitely the game of the weekend. But we will park it for there and move on to the next one.
We will, of course.
So next up we have France v Italy. Less of a marquee fixture, but definitely one that the French will be looking to try and kind of impress some of their home fans, even though the home fans won't be in, but just they will be back at home against Italy, a chance to kind of cut loose a little with a changed squad, but an exciting game.
The game itself is set to take place this Saturday. That's the 28th. It's going to be at 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, which is 9 o'clock. That's in the evening local time.
Box office
in the Stade de France, to be reffed by Nigel Owens.
Lovely.
It's to be cold and clear in Paris, but with only light winds, so it's a perfect night for rugby.
Sounds good.
Obviously, it's still winter over here, so the conditions are quite cool. But it's to be a nice prime time game.
A nice winter game, and like as long as it's dry and as long as it's a little still, like even in the cold, there's scope for some lovely attacking 100%. Footy in even in the winter in the northern hemisphere. And for France, that's exactly what they'll be looking for. We're going to just look at both sides, I guess, and their prospects for the game and how they want to go about it. And France, the home team, obviously buoyed by getting that win back against Scotland last week, like pretty much avenging that Six Nations thing, although it'll still bite a little, but they definitely performed well. They grabbed an excellent try against a really good coming team and away from home. All of that's good for the confidence. This now is a different test.
Well, the first side are almost parked. They're almost done for the season. They've got a 2-week drill now with a young squad, which is different from even what was originally arranged with the Eleanor, but will be interesting nonetheless. They've got buckets and buckets of talent in the squad, which was named the other day. So that we have a decent idea of who the new faces and names are going to be. It's going to be Rodrigue Netti and Hassan Collingar. I'm going to butcher all of these names. From Toulouse and Racing at Loosehead, Mo Vaca from Toulouse at hooker, Bobini from Racing, and Borgari from from La Rochelle. Aldegheri and Antonio, who has been there for a while as well at Tighthead.
Good tight heads.
I'm not even going to rattle through the whole squad because I'll butcher half the names. There's a couple of names to look out for. Siku Makalu from Stade Francais has been making waves in the back row.
He looks exciting.
Interesting to see him involved. Baptiste Serran has been named captain, and his partnership with Jalibert is looking like the backup to Dupont and Ntamak,
which is nice. They've obviously parked Camille Lopez because all of this, again, it's a young squad. The average age is around 25, someone was saying last week. They really are priming themselves to be peaking in World Cup time, so this is a curious little 2-week window for the guys in behind the main guys. And
In terms of big names coming back, there's a few, like in the back line especially, having Dante back in the squad, but also this young lad, 20-year-old from Bordeaux, Mo Fana, is supposed to be a very good player. Olivier Clemenchak, obviously from Racing, getting his chance.
From Racing, yeah.
And in the back three, I mean, you don't talk about oodles of talent. Alvaretti Raka, who we'd all forgotten about.
Seen him in ages, and he's awesome.
Player of the season last year.
Yeah.
Could be partnered on the wing by Teddy Thomas. They also have the option for the young lad Mathis Labelle from Toulouse, who's their academy lad, who's been backing them up whenever their main guys have been out, and has been sensational, and is going to be in the first team now.
Yeah, Villiers, who actually was topping meters made stats and points scored in the Challenge Cup last year, was Villiers for Toulon, so he's actually putting up awesome numbers.
Haven't even mentioned Brice Toulon as well, so he's going to come in, and he's obviously super experienced. They might go with him at fullback.
Jeez, and Damien Penaud hasn't featured through injury as well. You have all of this oodles of talent.
Oodles of talent is right. And the back row with likely to be Cameron Wokey,
even Fabien Sanconi
from Racing will probably
he's
feature,
been in there,
and Gelanche as well. There's a bit of noise about him as well.
So
in terms of general talent that France have, they're missing their first team, but there's lots of new talent, and it's a big opportunity for guys, who are on the fringes to stake out a name for themselves and enter the conversation in the jersey.
You'd hope
they get to don their national colours when they haven't been in the picture, and hopefully represent them well and put on a show.
Yeah, that'll be the goal for sure. Yeah. Like anything less will be a little unacceptable from them, and will probably stand all of their prospects of breaking into that first team in poor stead if they don't convincingly put Italy to the sword, which is what France are expected to do.
Even more than that, like a little bit of disjointedness we can understand, but I'd be curious to see the extent to which the Galtier Edwards kind of system filters through in this second squad.
Do they look similar? Do they play a similar game to the first team, even with different personnel?
The Edwards and Galtier system has implemented this. Like, there's a lot more work rate in general around the park from France, and much more discipline on both defence and attack. They're much more disciplined side, much more focused, work a lot harder. We all know they have
tactically shrewd as well. They try to execute a few tactics. They have coherent plans and cogent plans to try and open teams up and play to their strengths. It's all positive in terms of where they were. Like you zoom back 3 years ago and look at a French team, and you're like,
but that was my point. That 3 years ago, it often looked like a squad that we have this week, where it was just a hodgepodge that was thrown together the week of with a bunch of top couture players that never really gelled or synced up with each other, and that's where you got the sort of stuttery performances. And I'm curious to see the degree to which it might filter through to them. How much can be done with these guys in a week when you consider they've been playing top couture's footy week in, week out for this whole thing. How much communication has been going on in the background.
Is there top down communication going on in the background? You'd like to think so, because I do really think that coaching ticket are proper rugby brains to a man for sure, and seem to have a cogent plan for France and how France want to play, and presumably even with the personnel changed, they'd want to try and implement that. So that'll be a point of focus for them, and it should be a point of focus for us just watching the game, because we don't know how it's going to look.
Who are the guys who are going to stake out? There's got to be someone who makes a name for themselves and tries to force their name into the conversation. Against an Italian side that has kind of struggled really defensively to cope with any of the sides in the Six Nations. France, who have probably the sharpest attack in the whole competition, should be looking to keep the ball in hand by and large and really work that Italian defence inside and out.
Only kick if you see space. And like they'll.
Well, you can kick to exit, but when you got the ball in the midfield, run at them and move the ball, vary where you're putting your players.
The other thing is, like, we still have with Italy, like, they miss tackles. Like, regardless of all the improvements they have undoubtedly made, they miss tackles. And France, at their best, ask you to make such tackles, make such reads on defence, flood channels. They do it at the top level against the top teams. Ask really difficult questions of single defenders looking at three men and force them to make a read and then a hit. And Italy are normally pretty bad at both reading and hitting, so it should be a recipe for French tries.
When they get the opportunities, taking them has become like
bread and butter
to them. Exactly right. And that's the game. That's the goal. Open them up and score some tries under the floodlights in Paris. The potential hiccups that could come France's way come from the back row area, where Italy are pretty strong. These new guys are going to have to stand up and not allow them
and stuff. They're going to have to impose themselves, not
allow the likes of Bram Stein to make plays against them and to dominate him both sides of the ball and to make sure the offensive ruck is resourced,
clean and quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well then, just in terms of just going to mention Baptiste Serran, who's going to lead them out from 9 as captain. We did learn that during the week. So his partnership with probably Jalibert as well, with Carbonell to come off the bench. He's kind of the senior guy there, definitely, and it's Petit General again, like Dupont in the main team. It's
going to be on him and Jalibert to guide them through the game and to give direction to everything that they have. That's going to be vital as well. Just the penalty count as well, maintaining discipline, not allowing themselves to be disjointed is going to be vital as well. And the line-out's definitely an area that they like to strike off, like all set piece that could be disrupted. Italy are good on the defensive line-out.
Yes, Bramstein again.
That's just a huge job on both hooker and line-out callers to get that right and to not allow Italy into the game. If they don't allow Italy into the game and they play their footy, even this change strip should have too much for them in terms of their offense and the way they move the ball.
Just their ability to rack up scores. Then for Italy, it's a different test. It's an away trip to Paris. Obviously, it's a tough ask for any Italian team in history. But there are a few things that they can take heat from. The disjointedness of France. It is a new French team. They can look to try and exploit that. Use their big guys like Bramstein, like Negri. It is disappointing that Pellegrini is out, obviously. We still wish him well. But even still, you have guys like Luca Bigi who've been impressive and physical in the tight. They need to try and make it a bit of a mess and slow France down. But I also am going to reiterate they should not kick a 3-pointer in the first 20 minutes.
This is your refrain.
I'm going to refrain it on Italy every time I preview their games, because if I see them kick 3, if I see them start well and I see France disjointed and struggling to get their own rhythm, and it's 20 minutes of Italy ball and they are 3-0 or 6-0 up after the end of it all, I'm just going to storm out like, it's pointless, because France are going to score tries, and they're going to score tries in the last quarter for sure. So it's like, recognise that, be smart, Italy, for God's sake. You have your energy about you when the game begins. Try and convert it into points, not 3 points, 7 points. I feel so strongly about it, and Italy are my best example of it. When you're outmatched and outgunned in a contest like this, you need to make every chance you have as much point, and you need to create as much points out of your minimal opportunities as you can. And there are nice dynamics in terms of their ball in hand. There have been shoots of sort of maturity about this team in recent times, and some positivity as well. They've got actually for the first time in a while a decent balance to the back line. Yes, they do.
Canna and Garbisi are very good. They probe nice little conditions like nice little kicks in behind. They've got great attacking footballers in Zanon at 13, Minozzi obviously in the backfield, and Bellini as well. Those guys can finish tries, so they have a danger and a threat out wide, as well as a 10-12 combination that can both pass and kick, which is crucial. So mixing up that ball as they did against Scotland and plotting a course around the field is going to be vital for them. That's their winning conditions. They need to own the territory game and force the young French sort of line out to operate under pressure, and it's 22.
Force a bit of panic out of a disjointed French team. That's
where the likes of Bramstein come in. So you can kick the ball, probe the corners, move them around, get on top in that territory game, and then attack them at line out. And Bramstein's performance in particular, I think, is going to be vital.
Huge, especially without Pellegrini. He's going to have to do double the work, and he's already doing a lot of work for them. Against
this young French team, if they get their confidence up, they could absolutely hose Italy.
Yes.
So early jitters, and it is true, you're right to say that they need to capitalise if they can get them, but creating them is going to be vital, and they're going to need Bramstein to get in, to disrupt their ball, to make everything a mess on defence, and then to impose himself physically on offence. And Negri as well, and some of those other guys in that pack are going to need to step up and make plays and win contacts. And if they do that, if they can probe their way and get on top in the 22, they could, cause France to overplay it and overthink it and get a little bit of nervous out there, because they're a young side with not a lot of experience, especially up front.
This is it. Like against a young side, if they can catch them napping, and if they can score first, go 7-0 up, maybe even 14-0 up, then the panic could start. Whereas 6-0 will never do that. France will just patiently work their way into the game and back their fitness and back their attacking chops to see them through. But if you can shop them with a lead, then maybe there's a chance.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is defense, because there are a few familiar refrains with our previews of Italy. One of them is me asking for them to not kick 3-pointers.
You've done that every time.
I've done it every time. They keep letting me down.
They never listen to you.
They've yet to listen to me. They did listen to you, however. You asked them last year to mix up their kicking game.
They have.
And now they have Cana at 12, and they've mixed it up, and that's good. But the common refrain from both of us is tackles.
Yeah.
My God, Italy, fix your tackling. It happens every time. Yeah. It's been years.
Last time out against Scotland, watching the game, it felt like they were doing a little bit better. But they still actually missed, I think it was 32 tackles from 110 attempts at a tackle, which is one of the lowest sort of tackle efficiency rates out there. And this was against a Scotland side that weren't moving the ball.
No, they weren't being very dangerous at all. So it's like,
little plays, like the Xander Fagerson try, which was a comedy, but the reality of that try that was scored by Scotland against Italy the last time out when they played was that Italy just stopped. There was no whistle. Like, it was a little bit of an awkward ball, but it was live football. And then Xander Fagerson, a metre out from the line, was allowed to just trot over with Bellini, and I can't remember who else was there.
Bellini was criminal. They both stopped, though.
Both stopping and just looking at him do it.
Yeah.
And it's the absolute soullessness that you see sometimes in the Italian defence that would break your heart and that would convince you they can never win a game. If you can't put your body on the line and defend your line at test level with everything that you have...
Throw a shoulder in, for God's sake. Look at what the Argentinians have been doing.
Yeah.
Throw yourself in there. Yeah.
That's absolutely... It is criminal, and that's exactly what they're missing, is that proper soul and proper work ethic and tackle success on defence where they're getting out of the line and sticking big hits.
Yeah.
Until they can do that, they're not going to be able to win a game. And there's no signs of it, but they still need to do it, so we're looking out for it.
Yeah. With all that said, what do you think? What are your predictions for this one?
I don't know. France probably not going to look their sexy selves given the absence of so many players, but depending on who they go for, we could see some Teddy Thomas and Alvaretti Raka and these guys.
Some good tries. They get their hands on the ball.
Brice Dulin, like some very, very good attacking players. So I'm excited to see them get on the ball. I think they'll score some tries. I also think they'll concede some tries. I think Italy will
probably score one or two.
So I'm going to be optimistic and say we have a decent score for the first time in the tournament. So I'd say something like 40 points to 24 to France.
I'd like that. I'm kind of more leaning towards the old, 25 to 12 kind of scoreline that will favour France, but I think France will definitely have too much.
Why does every game have to have both sides beneath 30 points?
I don't know, but it does.
No, this time it won't.
Okay, 60 points to 20.
Yeah,
why not? Let's have that. But no, I think Italy's tackling will be the death of them. I think some of these young Frenchmen will be hungry enough to score some of those tries, and I also think Italy will probably kick a 3-pointer in the first quarter just to annoy me.
They will.
Yeah, so
they'll be in the game.
So they might finish on 10. Actually, 10 points to Italy. That's what I'm saying.
I'm gonna say
one converted try in the 70th minute.
I'm gonna say 19 all tries, 3 tries. So
that'd be
change
nice.
it up. 40 to 19.
That'd be excellent. Jeez, I'd root for that 100%. But I think France have a little too much for Italy.
Probably
changes. But so we will move on to the last game, which features our own interest. We have Ireland v Georgia, the final game of the weekend. It is the Sunday game. It is on the 29th of November, 2:00 kickoff. That's Greenwich Mean Time here at the Aviva Stadium, obviously in Dublin. And it's going to be reffed by Mathieu Reynal, another Frenchman, in the man with the whistle in the midfield.
Yeah, interestingly enough, as luck would have it, appears that Sunday is to be the wettest day of the week in Dublin.
Good news for Georgia.
Well, I mean, Georgia, is it?
I don't know.
They haven't scored a point yet, and they've only had to play in wet weather. I don't think it's good for Georgia this time, because I think their only objective should be to score some points.
That's probably
to
true.
chalk off the back-to-back O's. So actually, the worst of it is supposed to have moved on by kick-off, but it is just funny that it's another...
Yeah, considering it's actually quite nice. It's tepid out here. It's been clear and crisp and still, but it's going to be a bit wet on Sunday.
Let's hope that it holds off, but it could be another wet weather one.
Yeah.
We're going to look at the game, obviously, from the point of view of both teams. It is a mismatch, but from Ireland's point of view... Well, we talked about earlier in the show the range of issues affecting this team. Yeah, it's a difficult game to really address any of them.
No, I think what you'll see from Ireland is a changed, obviously a fair few changes of personnel. There are a lot of guys in the squad who haven't got game time yet, and they will be looking for game time in this fixture with a mind towards probably Scotland the week after as the cup final, so to speak. But I'd expect a return to some of what we saw against Italy, where some of those pod shapes a little wider from the ruck probably will be there. They will be more keen to move the ball because they will be confident that they are better than Georgia and they will want to. But yeah, if it rains a little bit, there's potential for it to become a stop-start scrum fest as well. And Ireland, as much as Georgia being unclinical, Ireland haven't been very clinical themselves.
No, they haven't. They haven't. Definitely, movement of the ball is crucial. Ireland have been better when they've been dominant. To be fair, when they've been on top of teams, like with Wales, like with Italy. When they can impose themselves, when they get that little bit more time, they are happy enough to move it. They can sit a little bit deeper and take that little extra second to get it wide without killing the attack like it does against a top team.
Yeah.
So I do think they could improve in that area without materially improving for the big games. It's really impossible to do that against Georgia.
Yeah.
It's just about getting things right. From a squad point of view, Eric O'Sullivan has come in for the injured Ed Byrne.
Right.
Shane Daly from Munster, I think, and Stuart McCluskey and Kieran Marmion and John Ryan and Ultan Delan, who've yet to feature, are I think likely for some game time this week.
Yeah.
In terms of how they go about their business on the field, the temptation, as you say, is there to run Georgia around. Their outside defence isn't great. And Ireland probably do need some tries for their confidence on offense, and I definitely wouldn't mind seeing that. It is worth noting that territory is Georgia kryptonite, and Wales and England sort of prove that. If you can just own it and give them no opportunities to attack you in year 22. Their exit game isn't good enough.
No, it's
they
not.
can't get out. They end up chasing their tails.
Yeah.
So if you can set up stock down in their half and just edge the kicking game and kick better than them and open them up in the backfield
against them.
Their
Don't
fullback also
give away penalties in the middle third because
exactly.
There's no need to
be disciplined and kick the ball. Their fullback Kamaladze is a bit of a catastrophe. He's
well, some of the kickoffs that he's put out on the full.
Yeah, but even under the high ball, he's kind of all over the place. He's working as hard out there, but he's
wingers as well. We accuse Ireland of having auxiliary flankers in the centres, but Georgia have them on the wings as well. There's no actual speed in the back line at all.
So there's no real danger in kicking it to them, and you can chase up and then exploit their errors and then set up an offense and attack from there, which I expect actually is how Ireland will go about it. I don't expect them to run it or move it from
they're not going to,
especially without Sexton,
and especially if it is a little wet as we expect. I think they will just probably double down on it, edge the kicking battle, and then if they manage to put up a score, if Georgia are still sitting on a donut whereas Ireland have racked up 12 or 15 or whatever, however many points of a lead, then I think the more expansive kind of goofy loop plays off 9 and off 10 will start to filter in, but only in those specific set of circumstances.
Yeah, I think they will work it wide, especially at times. If they have it in the Georgian half, they won't be inclined to kick it unless they see some space in the corner to chip it into. But they will, from their own half, they'll kick the ball and they'll kick it deep and they'll look to chase up and post themselves on defence. But yeah, it's a mismatch for them. They should just look to get some plays off as they did against Wales, move the ball into the wider channels, reignite that pod system that disappeared in the big game against England and the big game against France. Get it back for this game against Georgia.
Yeah, dust it off before you put it back on the shelf.
Exactly. And move it wider. Get your loose forwards in the wide channels.
Exactly. All of this, you can win. They can win this game a number of ways because I do think they are just superior to Georgia enough to do it. But there are trappings that Ireland could fall into. One of them is just being too content to try and do what England did say and just take them on up front, go for it, or take scrums off penalties, run in the tight. It's like just playing them in, trying to play them at the area, the one area that they are competent at. That would be fundamentally stupid, but I think I wouldn't put it past this Ireland team to try something stupid like that. But the other thing is that on a macro scale, we were talking obviously earlier on in our review about their straight up skills as well as their tactics, but I really would like to see some tempo from Ireland here, because I think one of the surefire ways to beat Georgia is to inject tempo. You see it with when Argentina beat Georgia, Fiji beat Georgia, they just put such a pace on the ball that the guys just can't live with it. Their backs aren't particularly fast, but none of them love moving fast, and you can see it in their kick chase game, you can see it in their entire game. And one thing Ireland desperately need is for them to be more comfortable playing at speed. So I would like to see, even if it's a slippy ball, you're against a tier 2 side, try and be the more skillful, more assertive, quicker team and punish them. I would love to see Ireland approach the game this way, but I don't think
I think they might. I think there's a decent chance, but they will be mindful of the territory game as well to try and get on top of it in that way. They do need. It is a test for them, especially on defence in the tight collision area. Like if they're putting in a few changed heads, their Tyke Burns and your Ulton Delans and the like fronting up to those Georgian contacts will be tough, and if they find themselves in their own half, they're going to have to be patient on defence, wait for the Georgian error and stick those tackles, and don't allow Georgia to implement their
don't
shape.
give them a penalty to let them kick to the corner. Don't do it. Just stay disciplined, stay level-headed and make your tackles.
Also, there's a few areas where you can attack Georgia in the line-out area as well. You can definitely send a jumper up and attack them, and then on offence when you go into going into the corner and setting up a maul has been
their maul
very
defence
good.
has been shocking.
Even Wales with a slight pack managed to get a couple of good mauls off against them, so I definitely think that's an area Ireland will go to as well.
Yeah, probably.
But I mean, it's a probable win. It's a bit of a dead rubber from an Irish point of view. Just don't screw it up.
Don't screw
There
it
isn't
up.
much
Don't
else
make
to
it an
say,
ugly
you know.
mess. But try and look pretty and try and get some scores off and get a bit of confidence back after a bit of a pounding at the hands of the old enemy next door across. But from Georgia, from their point of view, look, it's a tough ask. We knew it going in. It's been mismatches all the way for them. They really should be focused.
They didn't have adequate prepreparation, and they didn't have a decent place to start with. They have yet to really settle on fire a shot, but they have yet to.
Their best moment of the tournament was definitely the scrum they won against England in Twickenham at 33 minutes or so.
That's right.
That was their moment of the tournament so far.
Last week would have been very frustrating for them. They didn't get the rub of the green they needed from the referee, but they also just weren't quite able to impose themselves in the scrum. I definitely think from a squad point of view, I would be disappointed to see Daragh starting again. They have pretty good depth at prop, and he's just struggling to deal with these test guys. He's not a test level prop anymore.
Yeah, and he's also asking him to go 3 weeks in a row against top level opposition is silly anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And they had so little prep for this. They do need to give some of their young, hungry under 20 guys a shot, which they have done so far, and some of them have looked okay. It's just another week to try and improve on what they have been doing, and obviously scoring is going to be an area of focus for them.
It should be their main focus. Can they score some points?
But that does come from, like, it's not a question of just like go hunting tries from minute one. It's a question of establishing a platform in the game that they haven't been able to do, and that's on a few things. That's on breakdown efficiency, on offense. Their defensive hustle has been good. Their goal line defense, like, you couldn't fault it. No. They spent most of their games in the goal line. They've conceded some tries, but not a lot. Their defence is pretty good.
Yeah.
But what they do need is a better kicking game to get up the field. They need to manage the games better, and then when they have the ball, they need to mind it. Yeah. And they need to mind their own discipline, edge the contacts, get on top, be physical, and then be wise on the ball, and then catch Ireland off guard with a kick, pin them back. But just establishing a platform in the game is something they've yet to do, and that's the bridge from which you build scores.
Yeah.
And they haven't been able to even assemble the first brick of the bridge. Really,
it hasn't looked likely.
So that's what they got to do.
In both games, to be honest, a Georgian score looked the least likely thing to happen at any given moment in either of those games.
It needed an intercept,
which was just not forthcoming.
Yeah.
So maybe Ireland will throw it to them if they're getting a bit basketball-y. Who knows? It would be disappointing, but not that surprising if Ireland are the one team that they do score against. But yeah, that's got to be a big focus for them, as well as just like getting their set piece more right than it has been. Targeting the scrum. Try and mix it up at line out as well, for God's sake. Like, targeting the scrum is something they always do, and they're always game to, even when they lose it. But the line out, like telegraphing a jump at 2 and trying to set up a maul off it, is not a way to attack these top level sides. It's just not. They need to mix it up.
They need to mix it up everywhere. So they do need their scrum to work. They do need to be physical in the contacts, and on top of that, they need a bit more variety in their game, especially their kicking game. Getting down the pitch. And bringing a much better line speed and much more pressure off kick chase, and actually being able to exert themselves and put pressure on the Irish. That'd be crucial. That'd be huge. And if they can do that, maybe they can make a scrap of it. Maybe they can win a few penalties. They've obviously got to watch their discipline. Who do we say is reffing? Raynell. It's a better matchup for them than most, to be honest. The French are quite more sympathetic to the Georgians than Pearson
they tend to officiate scrums more diligently. They award dominant scrums, and they're a little more lax at some breakdown sloppiness.
So from a Georgian point of view, that's definitely a positive. So winning some penalties, being disciplined yourselves, and setting up your position down in the Irish half.
Kick one into the corner. get the line out ball and start picking jamming and ask that question of the. They still that is their picture. That's the what they want to try and do. And not since the Uruguay game in the World Cup have we seen it being put into effect properly.
Well, I think
apart from
they
the
do
Rugby Europe,
and Rugby Europe,
but I'm just thinking
at tier one
at
level,
tier 1
it's
level,
tough, and they're still without a full-time coaching ticket, and that's always going to hurt them.
Yeah, for sure.
But listen, they have 2 more games left in this, and there's no reason why they shouldn't give it as good a bang as they have.
Absolutely.
And this man, Becca Gergadza, is a super player.
He's been fantastic.
And getting him on the ball is going to be vital to everything because he's a really lovely operator.
He really is. Very tidy player, good footballer. With all that said, what do you think? Predictions?
A 0-0 draw.
Oh, yeah, both sides struggling to find scores. They'll probably cancel each other out. 0-0 seems fair enough.
Yeah. No, I'll go for.
I'll take 28-0 if anyone's given it any COVID going.
Ireland, in all seriousness, comfortably ahead on this one.
Yeah.
Hard to know how disjointed Ireland are going to be, how seriously they're taking it. Is there such thing as an Irish backlash after last week? It remains to be seen.
Yeah.
And from a Georgian point of view, can they get something off? I'm going to be optimistic for the Georgians and say they will get a score, but I'm going to be negative for them and say that Ireland actually do put some stuff together. They've been pretty good at beating teams they're better than. This Ireland team.
It's true.
We used to make a complaint that Ireland used to play up or down to their own level. They just play at their own level these days. They lose to teams that are better than them, and they beat teams that are worse than them, and Georgia fall into the latter category. And so I'd say Ireland by 42 points to 7.
Yeah, maybe about that. Yeah, certainly a bonus point win. And some tries. Hopefully some nice attacking sequences from an Irish point of view. That's all I'm looking to do is see them look for and exploit
nuggets
space.
of positivity. That's what we have to look
space,
for.
Attack space. That's all we're asking. Okay, with that we will pivot on because there's a bit more in the international window. We have, as we mentioned at the top of the podcast, Portugal and Brazil are currently halfway through a 2-match series in being played out in Portugal at Rugby de Jamor in Lisbon. And this game is going to take place on Saturday, 28th of November. But the first game, which happened last weekend, was a comfortable 30 points to 10 win.
Comfortable probably doesn't do it justice. I mean, they ran in 5 excellent tries. This is 30-10 to Portugal.
Home side.
Home side.
Los Lobos.
Wolves. The Wolves is right. Yeah, that's an interesting one. They ran in 5 tries, moved the ball really well. Some great highlights from it.
Yeah.
And they showed a lovely flow, a bit of tempo on offense. And that we had way too much for Brazil, who were struggling comparatively to compete with the speed and width that Portugal were bringing, and let in tries pretty softly in the end.
Their one score coming from, I think, a maul try that was very much consolation at that point in the game.
It was after it was all over. They got one to pad the scores, right? And Portugal though, they look pretty tidy, pretty well balanced, well coached. I think they're a coming force. I think they've got eyes on the 2023
France
World
2023.
Cup.
They're only next door.
They were in the last World Cup in France. They qualified in 2007.
There you go. Is that the last World Cup they've been in?
Yeah.
See, now there you go. Little nuggets like that.
Yeah.
Like, as much as we were talking about France building for a home World Cup, this is kind of similar for Portugal in a tier 2 capacity.
It is. Now listen,
huge. They're a ways off it yet.
Chile and Uruguay did similar things to this Brazil team.
They did.
But I think they look very tidy. They had some positive results in Rugby Europe. It's a shame they didn't get to have their match against Spain.
Yes.
But that's all to come next year. I think it's great to see them entering the mix, and I think it's great to see a few of these teams in Europe, especially in tier 2, in particular Spain and Portugal, really step it up a notch and actually start playing some lovely attacking footy that contrasts with what the Georgians are bringing, and with the Romanians sort of falling away in recent years. The Georgian dominance has been so farcical when you can see how much they're struggling to compete with the tier 1 teams, and they're just left in this limbo land that must be endlessly frustrating. I think that Spain and Portugal bringing more competitive, wide running rugby is only going to be a positive, and
a good thing for Rugby Europe, and just a good thing for tier 2 rugby in general. I can't speak highly enough of them. Well done, Portugal. It was a really impressive win. Some lovely silky highlights on it. One curiosity is, why are the highlights only available on Rugby Portugal's website and not on YouTube?
No good reason listen,
goes back to our point about like why are these tier 2 games so difficult to find? Like we're doing
clashing,
research for a podcast, and that's how we have to find them. Like
it's clashing as well with the Test internationals going on in tier 1 this week. So there's just no broadcast ability.
Yeah.
You want to be a diehard Portuguese or Brazilian rugby fan to actually find it, and it's the exact opposite of what we want from these games. We want them marketed, especially when there's no fans in the grounds. You want to see them broadcast free to the public so that people can get a flavour for the rugby that's going on and what rugby is, especially in these countries that are so football dominated. Hey, we're playing each other in rugby, come and watch.
Indeed.
Put it on Facebook Live, put it on YouTube Live, market it. Don't schedule it to clash with other big rugby games as well, so you might get some rugby fan interest. All of these things would be definitely much improved. But listen, it is what it is. We complain about it, but it doesn't change.
Oh, it's just a gripe, but it does repeatedly happen. But they are meeting again, as you said, 3 o'clock this Saturday. In the final, it's going to be a two test series, so Brazil have a bit of an uphill battle if they want to remedy that 20 points.
Oh, I don't think so. I think Portugal looked comfortably superior. You want to see a bit better of a performance from Brazil, but Portugal, it looked like a nice matchup on paper, and now you're looking at it and you're like, ooh, Portugal, step up from Brazil. Maybe bring Uruguay next time.
Yeah, this is it. Uruguay or Chile, or maybe even Argentina 15. That could be a sexy game.
Who knows? But that was definitely a good one.
And then one other game we'll swing on to. We had England and France played out the second of their 2-match series in Twickenham last week, and what a game it was! It was definitely the game of the series of the weekend for sure.
For rugby,
like lovely attacking rugby going on. England managed to claim the series with back-to-back victories, but this was a much tighter affair than the 33-10 drubbing that was dished out in France the week before. It was tight. It was bitty. France were in the lead, looked to have the game won. It did start with a try for England in the 16th minute. It was that put them 5-3 ahead. It was a nice kind of bit of good fortune born of a bit of pressure. Like England were asking questions. A bounce pass kind of skidded out to the outside and was scooped up, so that was a little fortuitous, but it was well taken and it was well earned. But France struck back immediately, unlike the week before. France actually put together a nice little sequence and a sequence of pressure immediately after that, and then Santos at 9 switched it to the blind side to put Grow over, the big number 8 over in the corner, and that was 8-5 France. And then the try of the weekend, maybe Johnny May, but it's comparable. Beautiful coast-to-coast kick return. Cyrielle Banet, who was actually pretty pivotal in most things France did, but coast-to-coast kick return, absolutely glorious, flowing French rugby. Beautiful to see, and that gave them a 15-5 lead, a commanding one. But then several minutes later, Banet went from hero to zero and got herself sin binned for kicking out of the ruck, and like to watch it, like it's a sin bin. It happened right in front of the ref, but she just like basically leveraged herself off the opposing player and just literally kicked herself off the shoulder, and it's like, well, that's obviously a card. You can't kick someone in the ruck. And then actually England scored a maul try off that ensuing play, so it was pretty pivotal. However, Banet did grab another try later on, which was pretty seminal as well. She was pretty
centre of goal. But
the
23-10 lead now with 10 minutes to go, or just over 10 minutes to go. And that was chalked back by England, who managed to get 2 tries
in quick succession,
and then a kick from Scarrett to win it.
Pretty
clutch stuff in the last 10 from England, and pretty heartbreaking for France.
But it was like you could see the differences between the teams in that those little moments, because the first try, the Banet try was lovely. The maul try that England did score to get themselves back in it, there was a touch of undefendable about that. They were the dominant pack throughout the game, even though they were a bit inaccurate. So you don't really blame France for that. But for the second try, I think who was it who scored it? Ellie Kildunn took a try. She took it well, but she shrugged off like 6 potential tacklers and really should have been grounded sooner. It was the maul was just positive, and actually a point of intrigue was it was both hookers got on the scoreboard for England, Lark Davies and Amy Cocaine. But Ellie Kildunn, squirming through floundering, tired French defenders, and contrast, the 2-2s, the 2 and the 16 got on the score sheet for England. And it was actually the game losing play came from the French number 2, still on the field at 80 odd minutes and lying on the wrong side of the ruck under the post, and just seemingly gassed.
There's still a touch of amateurism to the non-English teams in women's rugby, and that's telling. But from an English point of view, great clutch to get it out.
Absolutely.
Sort of reminiscent of that sort of all-conquering all-black team that we were seeing in 2015
Well, it was
kind of
it was
era.
2013, was it, when they went unbeaten?
Yeah, and then right through
Yeah.
through to 2015 and beyond, they used to have that clutch ability to come back from behind and win games to the death, knowing
Even
their
they were
superiority.
outplayed and outscored and outfought for large periods of this game, but then the last quarter clicked in and it was really all in England, and they've cemented their place at number one in the world. They end their season in 2020 unbeaten, like those mighty All Blacks, and with a show like this in their final game of the season where they come back from behind to keep that unbeaten record, like, it's pretty clutch stuff. They're phenomenal.
Great stuff. They're the number one team in the world, and they're unbeaten this season themselves. And you gotta hand it to them.
Tip
Team.
the hat, and it was a great series, and what a great game as well.
It's a super game for women's rugby, and great to see that one broadcast on the BBC. As starkly contrasts with the way that the Tier 2 stuff has been broadcast. It's England very much flying the flag for women's professional rugby, and a great team. Great to see.
Yeah, for sure. With that, we will move on to club rugby. Geez, we're going to do a cursory wrap up because I know the show's getting long, but we are going to run through some of the things that have happened in the domestic seasons all around the globe in the week that's gone. And obviously the main one that we're looking at is Super Rugby Unlocked, which has wrapped up, finished, finito last weekend. And the champions are the Blue Bulls, or the Bulls as they were in this contest.
Yes. They're not blue this time.
No, but they were blue, and they are blue. The Captain America Bulls. Yes, they managed to see off the Pumas 21 points to 5 in their final fixture.
Anticlimactic, but they got the W. Unfortunately, the Sharks Stormers game was cancelled, so they actually would have won it anyway.
Yeah, a few of the cancelled games have definitely dampened this tournament a little, which is unfortunate, but sure, it is what it is. COVID.
It is what it is. It's functioned as a chance for the South African players and teams to get up to speed and guys to make a name for themselves. The Cheetahs comfortably beat the Griquas and managed to get themselves up into third, but I do suspect the Sharks or the Lions, well, not the Lions actually, the Lions are only in 10 points, but the Sharks would have overtaken them with just a point.
Yes, we have the Stormers, Cheetahs and Sharks all on 17 points, where the Bulls are out on top with 23.
And the Stormers and Sharks had that game in hand. They would have seen one or the other of them or both of them over the Cheetahs in the end. But the table by and large makes good sense. The Bulls won their clutch games. They lost to the Cheetahs early but responded very well. They have the best, most physical team in the competition. With big Jake White in there.
Jake White
is
putting something together at the Bulls. They had been a little floundersome over the last few years, but they look a little bit more tight, a little more cohesive this time. Definitely a bit more of team spirit and a very good assured presence at 10.
Congratulations to the Bulls for winning what is in effect the mid-season trophy, though.
Yes, the mid-season trophy.
Because there's a whole other tournament starting this week.
Yes, and we're going to switch on to it. The Currie Cup. A far more familiar entity than the Super Rugby Unlocked iteration.
Yeah, it would have been like they could have just had them all play each other twice and call it the Currie Cup.
They could have.
That would have been perhaps more sensible. But now they're moving on and from Super Rugby to rename the teams for the Currie Cup.
But the points and things do stand, is that correct?
I don't think so.
Is that not
I was
true?
checking this, I'm not sure, but I was checking the website and I don't think so. They seem to have it all chalked to matches played and on the Currie Cup table.
Okay.
So I think it all resumes this time. Obviously, it's just if you had your advantages at home, you had them for one tournament rather than the other. It all evens out.
Seems a bit weird.
But it definitely makes a game of it. You know, with all of these cancelled fixtures, it's now even playing field. Start again. And we have 3 big games coming up this weekend. We have the Natal Sharks against the Pumas. That's in Kings Park Stadium. That's going to be on Friday at 5 p.m. Sharks have been good this year. You know, they've been
good without being spectacular. They've
improved in recent weeks. They were started the season brilliantly, came back poorly. I think they've started to get a bit of momentum back. Kerwin Bosch in some good form.
Yes,
I think they'll have.
They
enough
still
for
have
the
some
Pumas.
clutch and they still have grit. And I think for the Pumas, the Pumas shorn of the few talismen they did have, like your Rudolph and your Fouche. Those guys obviously gone, so it's the
heart ripped out of them.
Yeah, a little bit.
On Saturday, the curtain raiser is Griquas against Lions, which is in Griquas Park. That's going to be on Saturday afternoon at 2:30, and then the Western Province play the Blue Bulls, win the game of the weekend in Newlands. Last time that the Bulls will ever go to Newlands, and they were making a point of that. Newlands is getting, I think, wrapped up at the end of the season. I think. It's crazy.
That is crazy. It's such an iconic stadium.
I know.
I'm a big fan of Newlands.
One of the best stadiums ever, and to see no fans in it for its last while is obviously sucks.
Yeah.
But that's going to be potentially
it's
a tournament deciding game on opening weekend.
Could be on opening weekend, but they both. It's not like the beginning of Super Rugby Unlocked where they're trying to knock a bit of form together. These guys have kind of found what they're trying to do. They've kind of blended as a team now.
It's a fair contest,
and it is certainly the game of the weekend from a South African point of view.
If the Western Province can put something together with Willemse and Warwick Gallant looking fantastic, and then a bit of physicality from Bongi Mbonambi and the boys up front, if they can match the Bulls for physicality, they have had some lovely offense in recent weeks, and so maybe they could open them up and change the dynamic.
It's true. It's potentially possible, but then similarly, you have breakthrough guys like Stedman Gans over on the Blue Bulls side. You can't write it off. There's definitely scope for good attacking footy from both of these sides, but good physical rugby. Not just taking footy, physical rugby.
Yeah, and some of the games towards the latter end of Super Rugby Unlocked were supremely physical.
Yes. You started to see the Springboks really step themselves apart.
Even the game between the Sharks and the Griquas, there were ferocious hits coming in, and it's starting to look better. It's starting to look like if they assembled a Springbok squad now to play a rugby championship, they'd almost be favourites for it. Whereas at the start of it, you'd be like, this is hodgepodge nonsense.
Yes, it's true. So they're finding the form, and you can see the class in some of these players, and there are a lot of class players in all of these teams. So the Currie Cup, the more traditional one, the one that we're very familiar with.
I think being Currie Cup champions holds a little bit more sway than being Super Rugby Unlocked champions.
It's true, but if you could be both, jeez, that's what the Bulls will be looking for. Yeah, be bullish with it. But with that, we will park South African rugby and move on to Kiwi rugby. Down there, it is the final weekend of the Mitre 10 Cup. So as such, it's the final weekend of New Zealand's season in both ways. Obviously, the All Blacks playing their last game, but the domestic game is coming to an end as well. We have in the championship final. So this is their second tier. They have a final in each for promotion, relegation. Hawke's Bay against Northland, and actually both those sides play thrilling attacking footy. And often those championship games, while of a lower standard and perhaps less tariff, but I mean it's a big coup to get. It's a big donut to try and escape into the Premiership and play with the big boys. Hawke's Bay and Northland, they tend to be more running, free-flowing offensive games. And Hawke's Bay, the Magpies, we learned the other day, black and white obviously. Good attacking footy played by both, and expecting decent conditions down there as well. It is summertime in pretty much full spring into summertime down there. The games have been taking place at a good clip under good conditions with crowds, so they've always been good spectacles. And this, I think, more of a curtain raiser, but definitely a good one. That's the Friday night game, is the division below. But then the main event comes on Saturday.
Yes.
Which is going to be at 6:05 a.m. kickoff here, I think. Is that what you're saying?
That's it. Yeah, that's over here, local time. It's obviously evening time out in New Zealand. But it's Auckland against Tasman Mako.
Yes.
And it's a big final. Tasman the champions, Auckland the table toppers.
Yes. Good dynamic. We did watch Auckland play. They had their semi-final the other day. We did watch that one get through. They look a good physical side, a good control
ended up
side.
just owning Waikato in the physical areas pretty much for the entirety of the game,
and pretty much the difference
proved enough for them to win the game.
But a different challenge with Tasman, who are definitely a very fancied side. They are champions, as you say. They're also being touted for a Super Rugby place. If Super Rugby Aotearoa is to continue,
if the All Blacks are to bring in another side just to increase the dynamic, as South Africa have done, I think Tasman are supposed to be the side that do go up. And,
there you go.
That's definitely a fun.
Well, this adds a little bit bone of contention. If Auckland can win that fixture and take the thing, then they'll be putting their hands up going, why not us?
Well, Auckland are the Blues though. Auckland are the Blues. But Tasman is its own area, and that's its own, like, if they were to do another Super Rugby franchise, I think Tasman Mako might be it.
That's cool. And Mako, for those who don't know, is a shark in New Zealand.
Apparently,
things you learn looking over rugby.
That makes Mako Vunipola a shark.
Sharky Vunipola. It could do. I don't
know if it does or doesn't. But the main thing from our point of view is that it's going to be a banging game of rugby with consequence, and two very good, the best of New Zealand domestic rugby, obviously minus their All Blacks, in a fitting way to round out their season down south as well. So
more power.
Happy days. Should be a fun one to take a look at.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll move on to more domestic matters. In a European point of view, we had a few things happen this weekend. Obviously, we had the English Premiership returning, which is probably the most newsworthy of the more local domestic games. Returned last weekend with Newcastle replacing Saracens. Saracens now down below, and Newcastle actually got off to a winning start. They won their first game, which was positive.
Yeah, exactly. That's a bit of a thing. Like Newcastle they've never been rollovers, and they've never. Teams in the Premiership have a curious way of not submitting to relegation quite as you might expect. It tends not to be the blowout unless London Welsh or the like come up. It tends not to go down that way. So Newcastle definitely in there in the mix, and other teams will be on notice. I watched the opening game of the tournament.
It wasn't the best game of the weekend.
No, it wasn't.
Exeter, lots.
Yeah, it was 33-3 for Exeter over Quins in the Stoop, and they ended up running up the score towards the end of it. But I mean, Quins just impotent for the whole game, couldn't get anything off. Marcus Smith lacking for confidence. They were trying to just sort of kick Exeter into the corner, which is not like on paper not a bad strategy, forced them to exit. Ended up it worked at times, but they just ended up not being able to find points. Yeah. And then Exeter came into it in the second half and found lots of points.
There you go.
And then it ended up on lots of points to not many points at all, and
it was a familiar picture in the Premiership. They're just not coping with Exeter. The game of the weekend, as we touted, was definitely Wasps v Bristol, which is such a rivalry, and these two teams just play out great test matches, and Bristol looked to have won it. They haven't won in Wasps, and they were saying it was something several decades or something. It's a long
sure
big barrel.
Decades.
I think it might be a decade. I think they were saying, but it's a long old while, and they were so close. It was the last phase. It was they stole it at the death. But fair play to them, Wasps. They really do have an Indian sign over this Bristol team.
Yeah, big win on opening weekend for the runners up. Leicester also edged Gloucester 38-15. That's a
very interesting result, I think, because Leicester have been pretty hopeless, and they've just got rid of Jordan Murphy, which is a little glimmer of hope.
Yeah,
and obviously 38 points.
It's harsh on Jordan Murphy, but it's time that they move on, and it's time that they adopt to sort of better
new think.
New think is good for Leicester for sure, and seeing them turn a corner would be great.
Yeah, because Gloucester are no pushovers a lot of the time. Well, sometimes they can be, but they're not really, and especially for where Leicester were at last season. This is a really encouraging opening round fixture. Obviously, we were saying Worcester and Sale also won their opening games, but they were kind of less interesting. And then just some of the games to look out for this weekend. We have Newcastle v Sale, which could be both teams unbeaten thus far after week one. That could be a good one. Gloucester v Wasps could definitely be, if the weather holds off, could have some nice running attacking footy in that one. Northampton Quins, probably a lower caliber, but they're probably similar a good matchup, but probably not quite title contenders. And Exeter v Bath, as far as your title contenders are concerned. Exeter Bath is a proper game.
Can somebody get a glove off on Exeter? We shall see.
It could be Bath. They're less disturbed by the international window because their halfbacks are still in there, and a few other players. So maybe.
It remains to be seen. My suspicion would be no, but we'll see if someone can take them on. The Pro 14 continues on as it has in the last number of weeks. The sort of main dynamics have not eased off in any sense. Leinster, Munster and Ulster all maintain their perfect sort of beginnings. I think Leinster are the most perfect. They've had a bonus point win in every single round.
Yeah.
That continued against Cardiff. Ulster, I think Marcel Coetzee ran in 4 tries and their dominating win over the weekend. I think it was against Zebra. And
actually that was the weekend before, I think.
Was that the weekend before?
I think because Connacht were playing Zebra this weekend.
Oh, well, and they beat them. Well, Ulster managed a win of some kind, just like the rest of them did.
Yes.
Munster ended up edging a bonus point win themselves, despite not even playing that well. So the Irish versus non-Irish dynamic and disparity continues in the Pro 14.
It does. Munster definitely, they won with a bonus point out in Glasgow in a scrappy enough game. They're starting to move the pill a little bit more, which is positive from Munster's point of view, just to be specific to them. The bonus point was nice. They tried to get some offloads. The question mark is, if they meet a better team, will they just revert to type, as Ireland do? And I suspect probably is the answer. And the worry with the Pro 14 is the step up, or is the gulf between the calibre of opposition here versus the calibre of opposition in Europe going to be enough to shock all of the Pro 14 teams, even the ones in good form. It was last year.
It was even after the restart as well.
Yeah, it was. So it could be again. So
shout out to Gavin Coombs, 6 tries and 4 starts from Munster from number 8.
There you go.
That's pretty good
stuff.
That's
exciting. That's exciting stuff.
But yeah, we in terms of the matches to watch out for this week, Cardiff Glasgow's a pretty good one. Connacht Ospreys could be close. Leinster play Scarlets, which on paper should be a good game. See if Scarlets can give them a rattle.
It's in Scarlets as well.
And Edinburgh Ulster as well, although Edinburgh under Richard Cockrell haven't been too great, but they could be decent games.
Yes.
Likewise, the Top 14 has continued on in France. La Rochelle table toppers managed to get back to their winning ways with a 9-6 win over Racing, which
in our game of the weekend,
9
shows
points
what
to
we
6.
know.
I didn't see it, but they managed to hold their place at the summit anyway.
Yeah.
With Toulouse, Clermont, Stade, Toulon, and Racing all just behind them. As is often the case with the Top 14's early season, it's all very bunched.
Yes.
And so the dynamics are going to play out over the coming months.
There are a few teams, I think, a few teams just behind as well, still in that playoff hunt that goes on all season, because there's so many playoff spots on offer, and there are a lot of good teams. But the dynamics are still at play, but there are definitely just a lot of teams in contention here. There's obviously Toulouse, Clermont, Stade, Toulon, Racing, all on 23 points, and then even behind that Bordeaux and Pau and all of these guys.
Some great teams and a long way to go in terms of that. In terms of the games of the weekend, we've got Castres taking on Clermont. That could be an interesting game.
Yeah.
Montpellier, Bordeaux, a bit of a clash of styles. Bordeaux not really got off to the best of start so far, but hopefully they can kick on into that one. And Lyon, Stade Francais, although Stade Francais without Macalou, and sometimes
some different teams will be shorn of their French players this week, which is an interesting dynamic for the next 2 weeks. Yeah,
but as is often the case, there are quality games to be found everywhere. Although I do apologise to anybody who took our recommendation of the Racing La Rochelle game to heart and chose that game to watch. 9 points to 6, but hey, a win is a win, and La Rochelle, Ronan O'Gara's boys, still on top.
Yeah, who I'm definitely rooting for. Got a big fan of La Rochelle. But yeah, with that, we will pivot on to our final segment of the week, the rugby news of the week.
We've got to bring it down here because we've got to start with what we opened the show with as well, which is just terrible news. Obviously, the former France and Stade Francais star Christophe Dominici died suddenly on Tuesday, aged 48, which is obviously terrible. Way too young. Scored 25 tries in 67 games for France. Career span from 1999 to 2008. He went to 3 Rugby World Cups, obviously famously scoring that winning try in the semi-final against New Zealand. Won 4 Six Nations titles, won 2 Grand Slams, won the Top 14 5 times, and played in 2 Heineken Cup finals for Stade Francais. An incredible resume in terms of reading it out there, and it doesn't do him justice in terms of like where we're coming from growing up in the sport. He was one of the superstars.
Before there was Vincent Clerc, there was Christophe Dominici in that 11 shirt tearing teams up.
He was one of the best wingers we ever saw, and like when we were growing up we would have got rugby really just, it would have been the domestic stuff and the European stuff, and it's only really come in now in the last 10-12 years or so where you actually get to watch the domestic stuff from all over the place and watch it from South Africa, New Zealand, etc. And Super Rugby. But what we were able to see, he was one of the real stars of the game.
Every Six Nations, every time we were playing France, it was the fear that he would cut us to ribbons.
I mean, we had Brian O'Driscoll, they had Dominici when Ireland played France in those early years, and that was very much the dynamic. And he was one of my favourite players ever to watch, and it was definitely horrible news.
Pretty grievously sad news. It really did colour the week in a negative light. And
it's just terrible. It's way too young for him to be gone. We're only young men, and we were watching him play, so it's awful. And obviously, thoughts are with his family and everything as well. And we do need to be mindful of people as well in terms of players. Looking after them, we admire them when they play, and then the last thing you want to have happen is then for them to be forgotten, when they retire, and to be left behind in any kind of way. And I don't know if that's what happened here.
Well, I know that he did have a coaching role with Stade shortly after his retirement in 2008. He was with them in the coaching ticket, but I think he's been kind of gone from the game for a few years. And
it's just important that these guys be looked after, and they it's not. I'm not saying that didn't happen here. I have no idea, but I just think it just minding each other and minding people within the rugby community is definitely something that we should focus on. If there's anything to be taken from this terrible tragedy, I think it's that.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely just rest in peace, Dominici. Just one of my favourite
one of the all-time greats, and we can still reminisce on some magnificent moments. What he did in a rugby jersey is scarcely eclipsed. He was a magnificent player.
Definitely true. All right, we will leave that rather grievous news and swivel onward because a few other things did happen this week. We have to go back to last Thursday, the draw for the 2021 Women's Rugby World Cup, which is going to take place in New Zealand, but the draw for the groups took place in Auckland. And the pools, I'll just read them out, are as follows. There are 3 pools. There are also 3 spots that are still to be confirmed because the qualifying tournament was postponed due to COVID. But Pool A is New Zealand, Australia, Wales, and the final qualifier winner. Pool B then is Canada, USA, Europe 1 qualifier, and Asia 1. So 2 qualifiers to be confirmed in that pool. And then Pool C is England, France, South Africa, and Fiji. England and France inseparable to the last, as it seems.
The French girls won't be too happy seeing that, to be in all honesty. South Africa and Fiji, as scary as that group looks on paper, South Africa and Fiji in the women's game are a little further down, and Canada and USA are actually right up there. So Canada, USA and 2 qualifiers reads to rugby fans as like the easiest group in the world. It's not. Canada and USA are proper teams. Likewise New Zealand and Australia.
I think Canada are the 3rd ranked team in the world at the moment in the women's game. They're
right.
very, very good. And New Zealand as well, similarly the Black Ferns, a mighty force, and the Australian women, there's a good prickly dynamic to that.
And I tell you, there'll be a serious fracas in there for that Europe 1 spot. With Spain women are a very good team themselves, and Ireland obviously are going to be hopefully trying to get in there, with Scotland as well.
And I think there's Romania are in that as well, and Russia.
And
serious.
That's going to be a right
round robin scrap.
I suspect that Spain, Ireland, or maybe Scotland will take it.
Yes, but then the hope is as well, like if Europe 1 and Asia 1 will be confirmed first, and then there's another round of qualification for the final qualifier winner. So all of the teams
probably going to come out of Europe as well.
Probably, likely so, but all of that's to be confirmed. But the pools are set in stone now, and you had Jacinda Ardern was down there drawing balls out of the hat, and as was Dan Carter. It was a nice little spectacle they did of a Thursday. I actually did sit down and watch it. And it's just good to have them decided, and good to see that the Women's World Cup is motoring ahead for 2021.
We've a couple of stories as well, just from the world of European Tier 2, which we've been speaking of positively. Romania have managed to complete a massive €360 million redevelopment.
Unprecedented in this COVID time. Most of these unions have been asking for money, not spending money.
Well, I don't know where the investment has come from, but it might have been something that was in the works for a while. But they've effectively done a rebuild of their stadium in Bucharest, and their new shiny 8,500 seater stadium will greet them whenever they gather for the next test match. And I think that's definitely good news. Andy Robinson in charge of Romania. So maybe there's a bit of money, and maybe I don't know what the crack is in terms of why they've emerged with all this investment, but there looks to be an active approach at getting Romania competitive again, which is a long time coming, because they've been doing nothing but failing.
They had been competitive, but one of the things that there was interesting points that was made about this is with the new development, there's undersoil heating, and one of the key things about Romania, they used to have a club in the Challenge Cup. They were kicked out because a lot of the time their pitch was unplayable from frost and stuff. So the hope, I think, with this investment is not just that the national side can have a great stadium to greet teams, but that maybe a club side with now a pitch that can host games can put themselves available for Challenge Cup spot, and I would be all for that.
The Challenge Cup is opening up to Tier 2 sides a lot more, especially with the Champions Cup. I know it's only for this season, going back to 24 teams. They might look at opening up the Challenge Cup to Tier 2 a little bit in times to come. So absolutely, that's a worthwhile thing.
Yeah.
Likewise, Spain, quietly working away in the background, they've announced a week-long training camp at the start of December, which I just think is interesting. I think they're taking, like Portugal, Rugby World Cup qualification as a must, especially after the sour way it was taken from them for the last World Cup.
Yes, it was such a cluster by the end. Whistleblowing and all of these technicalities that were forced upon them, and
Spain have definitely set out their stall as taking this campaign very seriously. So Rugby Europe is going to get very exciting in the next few years, which is a long time coming itself. Another bit of interesting news here, the Queensland Reds have signed Michael Lyna's son, Tom.
Is he a 10?
Yes.
Ooh.
He is, but I think he's a 10/15, but I think he can play 10. He has been with the Harlequins Academy. I remember seeing a wee documentary on him. Obviously he's a slow burner. Well, we've been hearing about him for years and years and years. He's only actually 17, But yeah, I've been hearing about him since he was 12. Like, can this Tom Lynagh be Michael Lynagh? And now as a 17...
Do you know what? They should throw him out against the Pumas next week.
As a 17-year-old, he's been given a contract through 2023 by the Queensland Reds, and that's definitely interesting. You know, you do see sons of great players
being most recently in the 10 shirt, but there's definitely potential for some legacy rugby going on.
Yeah, it's something that'll likely materialise not next year, given he's 17, but over the next few years perhaps, or maybe not even until 2023.
You kind of need to nurture him. You see,
he's working away in the background.
Yeah, it's definitely good to see him have a contract as well. And then just in other news, funny one here, Bath have delved into the American football market and signed, I was very excited to read it, they signed Atlanta Falcons tight end Alex Gray, and I was very, very excited to hear that precedent set until I realised he's a former England Sevens player. Yeah. So what he is a rugby player who grew up playing rugby, who then moved over to the NFL, became a tight end, and has now come back.
Found himself, like Christian Wade is now, just in the practice squad season after season, and was like, hey, I want to play some footy. And so he's come back to play for Bath. They remains to be seen, though. You're good enough to get into an NFL practice squad as a tight end.
I think he's 6'6", I think, and a very stocky lad, so he could be a good bit of physicality for Bath, and Bath like to play physical footy, so hopefully that's a good match.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how he goes.
And listen, final news of the day. We have a interesting bit of news. The Kiwi rugby season not quite over, as a new Moana Pacifica side is set to take on the Maori All Blacks on December 5th. Now, what's interesting about this side, which is going to be representing the Pacific Islands, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, they're set to join Super Rugby, a new look Super Rugby competition in 2022.
Wow.
And this is sort of their first run out with a new squad named. They named the Maori All Black squad as well to be captained by Ash Dixon, which is good enough. What a legend he is. But they're going to go at it on December 5th. Tanu Manga is going to be coach of the Pacifica side, and I think he's making noises about taking them even in 2 years' time.
Yes,
but it's definitely going to be interesting to see a first go of this, and what it will be in effect is a Maori All Black side taking on a sort of a Pacific side, mostly with Kiwi-based players.
So a lovely barbarian-style rugby game.
Yeah, it's just going to be another showpiece event to really wrap up the season. I guess they were in a position where the All Blacks finished off away from home. Yeah. They have been on tour, so coming back and having a bit of a showcase event to really wrap up the season is a good thing.
Yeah, not bad. You can bookend the international season with the North-South and now this. So that's definitely exciting news. Always fun to see Pacific Island teams and just more Pacific Island players on the pitch. We've been deprived it with Fiji up here. We need to see more footy down there from some of these exciting players.
100%.
And this is good. Yeah, so with that, I suppose we will wrap up the show. What a mighty one we've had. It's a long old show, but lovely.
They just get longer and longer.
They do.
Don't get used to these. As soon as this test window's over, we're going right back to the short ones.
Yes, indeed. It's tough enough. It's unusual enough that there's actually
so much footy going on.
International footy in either hemisphere going on simultaneously. Sure, we had Six Nations and Tri-Nations all coalescing, but such is the year that's in it. But for those who've stuck with us, fair play to you, as always. Geez, you have more stamina than us. But if you're new here as well, or if you've enjoyed the content, please do like and subscribe down below. It does really help the channel out. And leave a comment as well if you agree with us, if you have some thoughts on us, if you want to correct us on anything that we've said or have any points, please just drop them in the comments. We do love having a bit of discourse and a bit of good rugby chat going on down below.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we'll wrap it up there. All the best to you folks. Take care. Bye-bye.
You're up.
Oh, okay. We'll take
done.
it. Yeah. A little off the lens, but sure. Look at you. The camera flies. We're happy.